Hopefully all you're doing well. Freaking hot here and here in the lab. Pretty bad. I think I'll stream for too long. I think I'm just gonna stream just to like get this over with. To be honest, it's bad. It's very bad right now. So maybe I will do this for like an hour and a half ish, 2 hours, and then we'll call it a night. But hey, let's see how the rest of the night plays out. So, let me see here. Oh, I forgot to change the. All right, son of a bitch, do that. So yeah, let's not waste any time right now. We have a lot to do today, so why don't we get to the main screen? Hey, how's it going? Here is the kit we're working on. Actually, let me do something here really quick. There you go. Let's see. There you go. Yep. So this is what we're building today. We're building the HG Demi Barding from Mercury. We started working on this last week, but the internet was just not having any of it that we were working on the last time. So today we're actually going to be doing we're actually be working on a little bit more. And before the internet was unceremoniously trying to boot me off, I only got like the head done already. So here's the only thing we have here that we got done. So why? So yeah, we're gonna have to. We're gonna keep continuing this kit. You're gonna get the instruction booklet. This over here. All right. Too. I need to set up something here really quick because I'm also doing some stuff for my podcast as well. But I want to wait until more people start coming in. So I'm gonna watch some other videos before that.
Limited amount of time before the next frame begins, once NMI signals the end of the current frame. Since time is of the essence, sprites for the next frame are built in RAM as the current frame is drawn, so they only need to be copied to OAM when the time is right. You don't have time to waste on building sprites after NMI. But how much time does it really take to build the sprites anyway? This pose is built using 15 sprites, almost a quarter of the number of sprites available for a given frame. Behind the scenes, he has an XY coordinate in RAM to represent his location. These 15 sprites are located on the screen based on offsets from that single location. Even if the player doesn't provide any input, Logic has to know which set of sprite tiles to use, where to put them on the screen, and what their attributes are for any given frame. All 15 sprites have to be prioritized and placed in OAM, and this is an example of just a single entity. Enemies, a heads-up display, and more exist in OAM as well. How are they ordered for priority? In other words, which sprites are most important? Strider, like many if not most NES games, shifts sprite priority across frame output. So if we use this frame as an example, 8 sprites make up the heads-up display, followed by Strider's 15 sprites, then Moe's 13 sprites, then Larry's 11 sprites, and then some other stuff not relevant to this frame. If we advance a single frame, the poses are the same, and the enemy positions on screen have moved just a little bit. In addition, Larry has higher priority in OAM now. The sprites used for Larry occur in OAM before the sprites used for Moe, the opposite of the previous frame. This example has no glitches and serves as a baseline for what we want to happen. All sprites appear in the correct place on screen when the frames are drawn. Priority amongst the enemy sprites has changed as designed. Happiness is only temporary. The nightmares are about to begin. Let's see how long it takes to build all the sprites for a new frame. This is the code used to do just that. Pause and read the comments if you wish. This subroutine is called on every frame for each of the 3 entities we see on screen in our example. Obviously, if we are building a character that is made up of 15 sprites, for example, you are looking at 15 iterations through this loop. So let's use this location as the start of the subroutine and this location as the end of it. We will tell the emulator that we want to see these moments of execution marked in our event viewer. If we connect the dots, it will tell us how long the subroutine took to execute after all of that looping is complete. The event viewer shows what the PPU is currently drawing on the screen, but also serves as a timeline of execution for the CPU, which is working on the next frame, and calls the subroutine 3 times as part of that work. Since frame output to the television must be consistent, this gives us a pretty accurate idea of what percentage of frame time it takes to create each set of sprites in RAM. You may have also noticed that they are not contiguous. Various other logic is executed between the sprite building subroutine calls. It is also interesting that one instance occurs so late in the frame. Execution completes here, and the NMI that signals that the PPU is done drawing the current frame and it is time for the next one occurs here. That's pretty close. I'll tell you another secret. The subroutine calls vary quite a bit in terms of execution start time relative to frame time. In fact, the very next frame starts the 3rd subroutine call here, but when does it finish? This is the moment NMI occurs in order to say, okay, give me the next frame's information now. The CPU has to follow the interrupt and jump to a special place in code at that moment to handle NMI logic. Funny thing about a non-maskable interrupt, it interrupts code execution. It's going that the CPU is placed in an infinite loop after it completes the work for the next frame. It is literally waiting on the PPU to finish drawing the current frame and interrupt execution. The PPU interrupts the CPU jumps to a specific place used for handling special logic to perform between frames, and then returns from the interrupt. It goes right back to what it was doing. If the CPU was in an infinite loop, the NMI logic may set the exit condition for that loop before returning. There are multiple methods for how this stall, interrupt, resume logic works. But what if the CPU never finished its work for the next frame? and the PPU is ready for that next frame. How does programming handle that scenario? Many games are programmed to repeat the last frame rendered and defer the next frame's updates if they run out of time working on the next frame. We aren't ready to render frame B yet. Just show frame A again. We'll finish up frame B and send it out on the next update. The result, from the gamer's perspective, is called slowdown. Video output frame rate will always stay the same, but the game frame rate drops. The music gets stretched, for lack of a better term, due to the stalling of frame updates. If you've played NES games, you have no doubt experienced it.
Oof.
During development, it may become clear that 60 FPS with only minor instances of slowdown is not possible, or would only be achievable a small fraction of the time during gameplay. To handle this, games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles use a slower frame rate, such as 30 FPS, on a consistent and deliberate basis, so they have double the amount of CPU time available before needing to provide a new frame. CPU framework and NMI logic are designed around this being the rule and not an exception. Slowdown may still occur, but at least it isn't on most frames as it would be if the game was trying to run at 60 FPS. Some games, such as Mega Man 3, may have too much work to handle during a given frame, but still want to baseline at a higher frame rate like 60 FPS. Frames are still dropped, but the game prioritizes sound, for example, so that the slowdown is not as jarring to the player. There is definitely a drop in frame rate. Performance is terrible, but at least the music keeps the tempo. So what about Strider? Oh boy, here we go. Strider just plows right through it. It does not care if it is interrupted in the middle of building sprites or doing something else to prepare for the next frame. Let's just render a new frame. You need the updated sprites for the next frame? Well, here's what I've got. Let's say you have two frames, A and B. The sprites for A were done in time, and the frame looks good when you draw it to the screen. During that time, your logic is working on the sprites for frame B, but it doesn't finish before NMI occurs. Whatever was done for sprites at that point in time is going into OAM for frame B, and those sprites will be rendered on the screen during the next frame. That means if sprite building code didn't finish, you shove sprite data into OAM that is part of frame B combined with sprite leftovers from frame A, and that is what gets rendered to the screen. Not only that, but this is not a seamless divide. Remember, NMI doesn't wait for code to at least finish building the current sprite. It interrupts immediately. So you could end up with, say, 16 sprites for frame B, 22 leftover sprites from frame A, and then one hybrid sprite that uses a new Y coordinate for frame B paired with a leftover X coordinate from frame A. You were looking at some combination of these traits for what we'll call the seam sprite for a given frame. Meanwhile, what about the disappearing sprites, the flicker? Those sprites aren't disappearing, they are simply in the wrong place for that frame. Now at first you might think, but shouldn't the sprites still be in the general area, just a few pixels behind where they should be if they are indeed from the previous frame? But remember, the game is switching sprite priority for Larry and Moe from frame to frame. The order of sprites in OAM is being juggled between frames. Leftover sprites and leftover priority order. What a mess. And guess what? It gets worse. After the hybrid sprite data has been passed to OEM for the next frame and the interrupt work is complete, normal code execution resumes, as expected, and it resumes inside the sprite building subroutine it never finished. It picks up right where it left off and completes execution, a total waste of time to finish building sprites that have already missed the bus for the next frame. There's probably an engineering and computer science joke in there somewhere. How do we wake up from the nightmare? How do we fix it? The simple answer is to reprogram the entire game. This sounds like a joke. It kind of is. But honestly, it kind of isn't. You could attempt to tighten up efficiency on a micro level, optimize subroutines, reduce code redundancy, etc. And if you are optimistic and think, That will do it so long as everything else is okay. I'd ask you to follow the game's
Leave
collision
here
detection
to work and
logic to
support.
determine
Yeah,
if
thank you, Ben.
everything else is
Really
okay.
appreciate it.
It's possible that making many small optimizations will still not be enough to fix the game that is broken in this manner. There is one really cheap way to fix it for the sake of computer science. If the problem is that we don't have enough time for execution to finish building the sprites, let's just manipulate time itself. We can overclock. We need more frame execution time for the CPU prior to NMI occurring, so let's increase the number of scan lines available prior to NMI. Remember that scan lines are not just what we see on the screen, but also a unit of measurement. This has nothing to do with the video output resolution seen on screen for the NES. With this change made, it's possible that unintended results are produced for Strider's gameplay. However, seeing as how Strider was designed with unintended results, best not to worry about it. The event viewer illustrates the overclock by extending our virtual vertical blanking period. We could get into a discussion about the accuracy of this illustration, but just roll with it. NMI now occurs way down here. This gives us more time in this emulated environment to finish code execution prior to being interrupted by NMI. Once again, here's an example of code execution time for the sprite building subroutine. Each character for the screen has plenty of time to have their sprites built prior to NMI. No partial sprites, no old sprites, accurate priority. Each frame is fully realized, so to speak. Let's sync up the stock and overclocked footage and run them side by side. It doesn't appear that there are any bugs in the sprite building subroutine, at least for this example. The sprites appear to render as they should so long as the subroutine doesn't run out of time. Speaking of out of time, that should do it for this video. There are plenty of oddities with Strider that are worth exploring. Perhaps we aren't quite finished with this game just yet. If you like If you've played Strider on the NES, you've witnessed what questionable physics can do. For those of you that haven't played it, you're in for a treat. Let's start with what is okay. You can stand in place, jump, and land. You can also stand on a ledge, jump off, and land. This completes our review of things Strider can do okay. If I run at this wall, will it stop me? Well, yes, but actually, no. Jumping toward the wall and holding right pushes us down the wall. Friction should slow us down, but it speeds us up. How about that left wall above this overhang? Stops us completely, sometimes even in midair. If you assume jumping while under a low ceiling would cause you to hit your head and fall, you were correct. Just don't expect it to happen immediately. Let's dive into the game's logic to find out why things seem to be so broken, and yes, this will include the dreaded triangle jump. I'll start with my own observations. Strider appears to be half-baked. Some calculations seem like workarounds and suggest programming was still playing in the physics sandbox at the time of the game's release. The physics lack optimization and cohesion, and they use a large amount of RAM for what they do. Let's start by reviewing what we've observed when it comes to implementing a typical jump mechanic. Player has X and Y coordinates. The Y coordinate is influenced by vertical velocity. That velocity is influenced by a gravity constant that is applied every frame at a known frame rate. Even if you are just standing there are still calculations between the frames, gravity to push you down and ejection logic to keep you out of the ground, for instance. Unless, of course, your game has bugs. Then things move in ways that don't make sense. When you press A to jump, upward velocity can just be plugged into the equation. The existing logic takes care of the rest. Strider does not use this method. Not only that, but Strider's physics are sometimes in conflict with one another. What is happening to cause all these problems? Strider uses a jump frame timer that counts down paired with a lookup table to determine which vertical velocity should be used for a given frame during a jump. Which jump frame are we on at any given moment? This one? Okay. Apply this velocity to our Y position. A lookup method might sound okay. Maybe it is extra work, but it should be accurate, right? Well, if you don't erase the jump frame counter to stop a jump, the game wants to keep looking up velocities in the table, and that's what happens here. The ceiling stops us, but the jump continues. Boom, physics tug of war. If Strider uses a table to handle going up and going down for a jump, what happens when you jump from a high platform and run out of table? What happens when the jump frames are interrupted? This is a good time to transition to numbers, and goodness knows there's too many of them. Due to the volume of logic executed on a per frame basis, we'll use the console log to monitor values versus walk the code. Let's jump in place and get some numbers. We have a frame number, Strider's location at the end of that frame after all calculations are done, the jump frame counter counting down, and the associated velocity for that jump frame. And you'll notice that this y-coordinate, -8, does not equal this y-coordinate. So much for the lookup table being a simple way to implement a jump. These lookup values are compensated. So yes, we look up the jump velocity for the frame, but we also do a little bit of math. The compensation is plus 1.5 pixels. I'll add it to the log and jump again. Some frames get it, some frames do not. For this normal jump in the game, frame 23 is the cutoff. So it appears that the plus 1.5 pixels are there to reduce Strider's ascent, and they go away when he is returning to the ground. We can disable the extra gravity using 2 Game Genie codes, and the jump goes higher. Perhaps given more development time, the velocities in the table would have been changed, or the table would have been removed in favor of a standard formula. Who knows? Now if you think that seems broken, watch this. When you jump off this high ledge, the jump table runs out of velocities. Now what? A separate RAM address is used for what I'll call fall velocity. If the table is exhausted and Strider is not on the ground yet, fall velocity is initialized to 4.09 and is increased by almost 1/10 of a pixel each frame until he hits the ground. Terminal velocity is 9. That initial fall velocity is a little strange. Why use this value? The normal jump ends with a downward velocity of +8. Rolling over to 4.09 means the game cuts your falling speed in half and then adds gravity each frame to speed you back up. Also, the handoff doesn't work very well. Check this out. If we use the console log, we can see that for a single frame, our downward velocity is a combined table value plus fall value for more than a 12 pixel downward movement on that frame. This is not the only hitch in this jump. It gets better, as in worse. Strider has logic to skip over some physics work when scrolling is taking place. This is probably to mitigate slowdown caused by adding scrolling to the already rather taxing logic used for frame-to-frame work. The problem is it doesn't skip over enough logic. Strider freezes in position for that skip frame as intended, however the jump frame counter did not freeze. We skipped over 1 frame's worth of velocity and gravity. Put simply, scrolling in Strider alters the game's physics. We are just getting started. Remember our collision problems with the walls and the ceiling? Let's see what's up. First, we're going to create on-screen boxes to illustrate targets used to discover collisions with the environment. There are a good number of them, and some targets change depending on the action performed. I've named a few of the locations checked that are also saved to RAM. That will make them easier to reference as we walk some of the logic. First up, running into the right side wall. This doesn't look right. He should stop moving right and maybe just jog in place against the wall. There are 2 operations happening here, wall collision and wall ejection. One of them is unnecessary as implemented. Let's first disable ejection logic using a single Game Genie code and see what happens when we run to the right. Am I going to run through the wall? No. I actually stopped in a way that you would expect. The stop logic sees that his head target hits a wall and zeroes out the X velocity that came from the player holding right on the controller. This continues to happen every frame and he jogs in place. What if we disable that but leave ejection logic enabled? It ejects him as soon as that front head target collides with the wall. It is almost the same as with no Game Genie codes. The wall collision logic ends up not mattering thanks to ejection logic throwing him 4 pixels to the left each time wall collision occurs. Disable both sets of logic and yeah. This is another example of physics routines that are not integrated well. Similar criteria cause the activation of different operations. What about jumping toward the right and left walls? What happens there? Welcome to the tale of 2 subroutines. Collision results for multiple targets are saved to RAM and checked multiple times throughout the code as needed, perhaps even too often. I don't want us to get lost, so I'm oversimplifying. Again, this is not comprehensive. For the first one executed, the code looks like this. For our focus, let's pull the following. If our front toe target experienced an environmental collision, and a jump is in progress, and the jump frame counter is under 42, and we didn't land, the jump frame counter is zeroed out to cancel the jump and the X velocities are cleared to stop lateral movement. Okay, now for the second one, and this one is a bit more complex. If a jump is in progress, and we have a head collision, and the front heel and shin do not collide with the environment, this probably has to do with platforming logic, erase all X and Y velocities. Note that if this happens, the jump frame counter is not zeroed out. Later in the subroutine, There is an area responsible for Y velocity compensation. We talked about this subject earlier. If we haven't hit the falling frames yet, we add 1.5 pixels. Otherwise, we see if we hit the ground. If so, we're done. If we didn't hit the ground and a jump is not in progress, we add falling velocity. Again, this is super simplified. The code itself does a lot more. Although many more things happen in these subroutines, I'll bet you can already see a big problem. Throughout the course of the jump, both of these subroutines are called. First the left one, then the right one. When we jump at the right wall, the toe collision is responsible for zeroing out the jump frame counter and X velocities. It cancels the jump. Shortly after that, the second subroutine sees that the jump is not in progress and skips ahead. The jump frame counter is 0, so we've reached falling frames, so to speak. We haven't hit the ground and the jump is no longer in progress. Falling velocity begins. That is how we slide down the right wall. We've seen the numbers do this before. We transition from using jump frame velocities to using a falling velocity, albeit not very well. So how about that left wall jump? To start it off, the toe doesn't hit the wall, and that puts us in an uh-oh state. None of these instructions are executed. The second subroutine sees that we jumped and hit our head, and our heel and shin didn't hit a potential platform, or whatever this part does. The X and Y velocities are erased, and now we are broken. The game considers the jump to be in progress. The jump frame counter still exists. However, there are no velocities to move us. Frame after frame, the jump frame counter counts down, and the velocities from the lookup table are erased, so long as the jump is in progress. If we perform the jump and use the log, you can see how Strider's Y position remains the same as the jump frame counter counts down. It isn't until we run out of table and fall velocity finally takes over that we return to the ground, either by design or sheer luck. Can we fix it somewhat? I have an untested solution that will probably break 5 other things. Let's try it. Here's the velocity clear logic in the second subroutine. Let's take this line that clears the X velocity integer and move it to a new subroutine at this address. There are zeros stored at that address right now. I hope they aren't important. We'll replace the line we copied with a call to our new subroutine. We'll also include logic to clear the jump frame counter and return from the subroutine. Again, this code change is for making a video. It's not a real fix. Let's see it in action. Jumping toward the left wall above the overhang now throws us toward the ground, just like when we jump at the right wall. The logic flow inside the second subroutine has been altered from this stuck state as illustrated to this. We now have a canceled jump and therefore also have falling velocity. We don't get stuck in the air. This same logic cancels our jump when hitting our head on the ceiling and sends us back to the ground. Did this change break something else? Maybe, but it works for our video. Rewriting environmental collision detection would definitely be advantageous. It would squash a lot of bugs and improve performance. This brings us to our final deep dive, the rather difficult to execute triangle jump. In several areas of Strider, it may be necessary to reach a higher level that a normal jump will not allow. When that happens, it's time to execute a triangle jump. As per the manual, jump toward a wall, and when you hit it, jump again in the opposite direction. Even though it's described in the manual, the November-December 1989 issue of Nintendo Power addressed the maneuver due to how difficult it can be to perform it. Their recommended technique is to jump at a wall, and just as you hit that wall, press the A button repeatedly and rock the control pad left and right. It also recommends a turbo controller if you have one. After having seen the code, this is pretty good advice. Better grab a taco because we are going to walk the requirements for executing a triangle jump. Let's assume the player jumped off the ground while pressing right. Here's the short version of what needs to happen. The first thing you have to do is collide with the wall to cancel the jump by clearing the jump frame counter. This has to be done or you cannot execute an additional jump. The second thing is probably what gets most people into trouble. Strider has to switch the direction he is facing before jumping off the wall. More on that in a bit. Finally, press A to perform a wall jump. Repeat as many times as necessary. This may seem simple, but the details and the logic make it difficult. First of all, when a jump is executed, that initial controller action is saved to RAM. Jump left, jump right, or jump straight up are the 3 possibilities. Whenever you attempt to jump again, this value is referenced to make sure that you change direction versus the previous, and first in our case, jump. Next, hitting the wall. The target used to determine collision occurred with the wall is here, the same target we've been talking about throughout this video. It isn't bad as a collision target for canceling a jump so you fall down a wall, but it is a little close to Strider for anticipating the chaining of another action after wall collision. It would be nice if logic either used a target further away to determine if a second jump could be chained yet, or stick Strider to a wall for a few frames if a jump was in progress when he hit that wall, similar to what a different game would do a few months later. And now, the worst part of it all, the change in direction and press jump requirement. Here we have an odd problem with logic flow and input verification. Let's use screens to illustrate time passing in moments of execution for certain logic. Time passes as we move down each screen and from left to right. We jumped at the right wall, collided, the jump was cancelled, and we pressed left and A to jump again, off of that right wall. The controller input left plus A is picked up here, at the bottom of our first frame of examination. The inputs are saved to RAM, and they're going to give us a headache here shortly. Multiple places in RAM are used. What buttons were pressed? What buttons were pressed in the previous frame? What button presses are different versus the previous frame? Techniques such as these are used in more games than just Strider. It helps track an initial press of a button, holding down a button, releasing a button, and more. Programming has to consider these things. So we pick up left plus A, make note of controller changes, and move to action processing during the next frame. Can we perform a triangle jump? No jump is currently in progress thanks to our earlier wall collision, so perhaps we can. The first relevant criteria to isolate in our deep dive is the controller change status in RAM. This is what the triangle jump logic uses to determine if the A button was just pressed. It was. A few lines of code later, it checks to see which direction Strider is facing and looks behind him to make sure there is a wall to kick for a jump. Uh-oh, guess what? The logic that sets Strider's direction, another value maintained in RAM, has not been executed yet for this frame, so he hasn't turned around yet. It won't be executed until about here, a very short while later. So the game believes he is still facing right. The criteria for the triangle jump fails because there is no wall within a certain number of pixels behind him. Now what? Frame execution continues, his direction is eventually changed to facing left, and we reach the controller read logic once again. It's highly likely that the player is still pressing both left and A at this moment, as only 1/60th of a second has passed since our last controller read. So we read it again, and the same buttons come back. And now, the previous frame's controller press is equal to the current frame's controller press. No difference means that the change status value in RAM is set to 0, because the same buttons are being pressed versus the last frame. Uh-oh, again. So now we roll into the third frame to check the triangle jump once more, and this time we fail the A button press logic because, well, pressed or not, the criteria we check for an A button press is whether or not there was a change versus the previous frame, that the A button was just pressed. The only potential way to salvage the jump is to let go of the A button and press it again. Observe how quickly you move down the wall in real time. If you press A and the jump doesn't work, it is likely you'll take too long to think of trying to press it again. So yeah, Nintendo Power had it right. As soon as you hit the wall, go nuts on the controller to try to get things to activate properly. If you collide with the right wall and press left and A at the same time, the triangle jump will fail because you aren't facing left yet. If you collide with the right wall and press A just before pressing left, it will fail for the same reason. If you jump right, hit the wall, and press left slightly before you press A, it should work. Then you still have to manage to repeat the sequence multiple times over while reversing the left-right direction each time. And don't forget that the frame counter must be under 42 in order to clear the jump frame counter and cancel the jump. If you jump from the right wall to the left wall, you will likely hit the wall before reaching 42. So you also need to stall a little bit before pressing right and then jump. Oh, and keep in mind, some physics are bypassed during scrolling. Your controller input sequence might be perfect, but it's possible physics routines we covered earlier won't clear your jump frame counter. You can see when the physics are bypassed during scrolling because the red targets flicker. If our brain had laces, we just tied our shoes together and face planted. Can we fix it? Yes. I have a solution thanks to a small change and about 30 seconds worth of testing. First of all, let's illustrate the default heel kicks using a script. I'll place a box on the screen for collision detection. Red means failure, green means success. They are set to linger for several frames. We'll also monitor the jump frame timer countdown and the direction Strider is facing. Failing to execute is pretty easy to do, and it really comes down to what is ultimately frame perfect timing. What we can do is zero in on the controller requirement for the triangle jump that demands a difference in buttons pressed versus the previous frame. Instead of timing the jump for the exact moment the A button is pressed, why not just see if the A button is currently pressed at this moment in the code? Hopefully, the many other requirements for a triangle jump will help keep this change from abusing Strider's otherwise perfect physics. Instead of address 5A, we will use address 47 hex, which holds the current status for controller 1. Not only does this add forgiveness for when you press A, it lets you simply hold down the A button and rock the D-pad back and forth to triangle jump off the walls. Give it a try using this Game Genie code. The collision boxes for the heel kick show that many more checks are performed, which isn't great for performance, but they only appear in the middle of a triangle jump criteria check. Okay, that's enough. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. I also have a Patreon available if you are interested, and thanks for watching. If you've played Strider on the NES, you've witnessed what questionable physics can do. For those of you that haven't played it,
The Secret Stories of Saint Seiya Part 1 is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is the first game to bring a true console-level experience to your phone. Explore millions of champion combinations and master countless tactics as you take on raid bosses, dungeon runs, campaign battles, and PvP. Hundreds of artifacts to equip and over 600 champions blessed with unique skills, you can build your team, develop your champions, and raid your way. I've been playing Raid for a while now, and two of my favorite champions would have to be Ursula the Mourner and Tutura Rhymehide. Ursula, a legendary champion, can cripple enemy attacks while boosting the attack of her own team, and Tutura Rhymehide acts as an excellent defense when navigating through the Hydra and Doom Tower. And he just looks really freaking cool and kind of like an adorable griffin-looking pet. And this month for Raid is huge. They just released a brand new faction, the Sylvan Watchers, with some amazing new champions. Forest Elves, Druids, Fays, they're all here. And if that's not enough, Raid's got a full lineup of events, along with a new season of the Forge Pass, where you can get your hands on some of the most powerful gear the game has ever seen. Also, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get your exclusive rewards in Raid right now. And if you haven't started playing Raid, click my link in the description box or scan my QR code here on the screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $30. This includes a free epic champion, Aina, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, and 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in-game. Hordes of treasure awaits you for the new players of Raid Shadow Legends. There will always be some element of chance involved in detective work. We start our search with a series of clues and cross them off as we go, hoping they'll eventually lead us to the unequivocal answers that we seek. Each new piece of information we uncover reveals a fresh strand of the vast informational web we're traversing, which is etched against a glimmer of light. But what happens when all these doors that undoubtedly should bring us to the right place instead reveal new answers to questions we never even thought to ask? What if all the hints you followed to get to that closed door turn out to be the keys to opening another? Most would assume that this would serve as a distressing realization for those who have dedicated countless hours of their lives gathering clues and investigating sources, only to discover that this whole time they've been barking up the wrong tree. But contrary to this mishap that may at first seem totally unfortunate to someone on the outside, a lot of investigators would tell you that this scenario does, in fact, have its own silver lining. Setting your sights on a lost artifact only to make an entirely different find through that same search to a lost media hunter is always a welcome surprise. It's like striking gold. We tend to call this sort of phenomenon an act of serendipity, or a serendipitous find, which is by definition an unplanned and fortunate discovery made through a chance occurrence of events. Since the beginning of time, throughout the history of product invention and scientific discovery, serendipitous events have taken place. Even though these kinds of moments have existed for ages, this term can be traced all the way back to the 17th century in a letter written by English writer and art historian Horace Walpole on January 28, 1754. In a letter to his friend Horace Mann, Walpole wrote of an unexpected discovery he made of a lost painting of Bianca Capello by Giorgio Vasari, and used the term in reference to an old Persian fairy tale known as the Three Princes of Serendip. In this story, the princes were always making discoveries by accidents and sagacity of things which they were not in quest of. Finding something completely new and unexpected, rather than leaving a search totally empty-handed, is a dream shared by digital historians, preservationists, and lost media hunters alike. And if you happen to find yourself in a moment of serendipitous discovery, it is essential to keep an open mind. Sure, you might not have found exactly what you were looking for, but what's been unearthed in its place has the potential to be equally as valuable. And perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these serendipitous discoveries is the 6 degrees of separation that lies in between. You'd be surprised at how many lost media investigations can have a source that acts as a gateway to answers on an entirely different lost subject. Let's say you're looking for lost footage and manage to track down the CEO of an animation studio. Though you're unsuccessful in obtaining said footage, that very same CEO knows a friend of a friend who, for example, has audio recordings of an unreleased artifact from an entirely different show. A serendipitous moment never comes up short when you're looking for lost media, because all that's lost has an intrinsic value to the communities that are looking for it. This very same concept of seeking out one thing and finding something completely different is exactly what played out in my latest investigation. In tonight's episode of Tales of the Lost, I retrace my steps and reach out to old leads from my previous investigation on the company Renaissance Atlantic in the hopes of finding some answers to another heavily guarded secret. This time, it's not the live-action Sailor Moon pilot I'm after, but rather another lost live-action pilot the company was rumored to have worked on, an Americanized adaptation of the 80s shonen anime known as Saint Seiya. Through my investigation, I revisit old leads, discover new people of interest, and learn of more lost artifacts warranting their own unique investigations that I never expected to fall onto my radar. With nothing to go off of but a 20-second clip and a handful of speculation, was I able to unearth the full pilot through this 6 degrees of separation? Or did my investigation, in the end, lead me to standing in front of a locked door with a pocket full of bad keys? Find out what happens next in part 1 of the Secret Stories of Saint Seiya.
Huh. Oh. V16.
Fresh off of the adrenaline rush of my last discovery, I was eager to set my sights on a new piece of lost media to do a deep dive exploration on. There were so many potential topics that piqued my interest, each with their own unique rabbit hole worth exploring. Perhaps I could look into more unreleased games, or maybe even television ads from the past that had gone lost and unarchived. After my previous discovery, so many fresh ideas began to form in my mind. But in the end, I made the choice to focus on a subject that felt a little more personal. I turned my attention onto a familiar face, a company known as Renaissance Atlantic. Yes, that very same Renaissance Atlantic that had a hand in the Americanized live-action pilot of Sailor Moon. A company owned by former Bandai America president Frank Ward. The same Frank Ward who, funnily enough, had helped me only a few months earlier in my attempts to obtain this missing pilot through the Library of Congress. Renaissance Atlantic was known for being the arm between Bandai and Toei Animation to the Western market. And aside from their cancelled Sailor Moon project, the company was also in talks to Americanize and adapt countless other popular Japanese anime for North American audiences. This was something I came to learn more about throughout my investigation. And during my time scouring information in the archives of the Library of Congress, I came to discover exactly what sort of anime had the potential for American adaptations. And what I saw on that list came as a bit of a surprise. In an alternate timeline, had the acquisition of certain shows gone differently, it's possible our introduction to Japanese animation would have been entirely different with a completely different impact on our culture. I can't even imagine how our animation and pop culture would be shaped with the absence of Japanese anime, a medium that's been so highly influential in modern storytelling and art. It was that very moment some months ago when I was researching in the Library of Congress that's really stayed with me. I wanted to learn more about that catalog of shows Bandai and Toei had discussed with Frank Ward and his team. And it was this whole deep dive in my efforts to uncover Sailor Moon that got me started on this trajectory towards another somewhat known, closely guarded secret held at the company. Among the many sizzle pieces and pilot scripts that had been submitted to the copyright library, I noticed a very familiar entry name. There was a listing of an adaptation for an anime that could generally be described as an early male counterpart to Sailor Moon. It was a listing of the successful 80s shonen anime known as Saint Seiya, a show adapted by Toei Animation with toy distribution handled by Bandai that was curiously at some point in association with Renaissance Atlantic, a company I had previously done extensive research on. Apparently, before Saint Seiya had been dubbed in North America, like Sailor Moon, the series had also been in talks at being reimagined from the ground up with a completely different name unique to the original series. Knowing this, I thought it only made sense that my next adventure would be a continuation down this familiar rabbit hole. With the company being an already opened window, I knew it could act as a perfect springboard for uncovering new information. But before we take the big leap into what exactly this lost Saint Seiya adaptation is and what I hope to find, it's important to make sure that we're all on the same page. Some of you are totally familiar with the original series in question, and that's great. But despite the anime having reached a global and mainstream success in and outside of Japan, there's still a staggering amount of people who know little to nothing about Saint Seiya. In fact, a lot of people, including myself, could not recall much from the series. Growing up, it was always one of those shows I'd see in passing, or I'd catch bits and pieces of it when waiting for other anime to air.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Most people I've spoken to couldn't even easily identify the series, and quite frankly, wrote it off as a lesser-known male equivalent to Sailor Moon. And it might come as a surprise, but this is a widely shared sentiment among those unfamiliar with the series, especially to the many viewers in North America. But after embarking on my own investigation, I learned more about what truly made this show so special, and gained a newfound appreciation for this series that quite literally pioneered an entire genre of anime.
Yes.
In reality, Saint Seiya is so much more than just a magical boys cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
The common misconception of Saint Seiya being a male counterpart to Sailor Moon is actually not a claim that's entirely out of pocket. Both series had a huge impact on anime and their respective genres on a grand scale, and continued to influence both its viewers and the animation industry outside of Japan. Through its own unique way, Saint Seiya's managed to reshape the landscape for shonen anime and flip the entire genre on its head through subversive ways of storytelling that had once been unfamiliar to the magical boy genre as a whole. Saint Seiya, also known as Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac, or simply Knights of the Zodiac, is a Japanese manga series written and illustrated by artist and writer Masami Kuramada. The Japanese series follows a 13-year-old boy named Seiya who, aided by his 4 fellow warriors known as the Saints, must fight to defend the reincarnation of the Greek goddess Athena in her battle against the Olympian gods that wish to take over the earth. Each warrior fights wearing sacred sets of mystical armor known as cloths, and each cloth is based on various constellations the characters have adopted as their destined guardian symbols, all empowered by a mystical energy known as Cosmo. Of the 48 bronze saints, Seiya wields the sacred cloth and mystical powers of the Pegasus that is protected under the Pegasus constellation. The first chapter of the series focused heavily around a tournament known as the Galaxian Wars, a battle between bronze knights who wished to win the most powerful cloth known as the Sagittarius Gold Cloth. In Seiya's quest to win the gold cloth and his battle against the Olympian gods, he's aided by 4 other bronze saints: Cygnus Yoga, a Russian fighter with powers of ice manipulation; Dragon Shiryu, a warrior known for his great strength and ability to invoke the energy of the dragon; and Andromeda Shun, a gentle spirit and true pacifist by nature, wielding an immense hidden power that makes him stronger than he actually appears. The team is later joined by Shun's older brother, Phoenix Ikki, originally introduced as an antagonist. Ikki is a powerful bronze saint that can channel wind and heat abilities of a rising phoenix. With their unique powers combined, these 5 saints possess an unstoppable force that can be harnessed to take down the evil gods of Mount Olympus once and for all. Saint Seiya proved to be immensely popular in Japan and had a lasting impact on the animation industry on a global scale. The series paved the way for modern shonen anime series to follow, and was unique from the typical magical boys format through its showcasing of diverse forms of masculinity. It had plot-driven fantasy, a compelling story with different arcs, multi-dimensional characters, intense battle sequences, suspenseful plot twists, and even underlying themes of Greek mythology, religion, and spirituality. It wasn't just a show that highlighted teamwork amongst friends, had interesting designs and cool costume armor, but also focused on more mature subject matter where the stakes were high and the consequences were dire. Saint Seiya has this magical duality of opposing themes that managed to keep it fresh and innovative to its audience, elevating its popularity and creating a similar impact to the likes of Dragon Ball, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Fist of the North Star. Saint Seiya's influence has been noted to be a primary inspiration behind many massively successful anime that preceded it, and these shows all went on to bring their own uniqueness to the shonen genre, such as Ronin Warriors and Mobile Suit Gundam. Tite Kubo, the creator of Bleach, even credited Saint Seiya as a major inspiration for his design sensibilities and action-filled battle sequences. Overall, anime and manga were essential in igniting the 80s anime craze, both domestically and internationally. Since the original anime's release, the series has had many spin-offs, 13 albums, numerous video games, 3 OVAs, 6 animated feature films, and 2 original net animations, with the most recent titled Knights of the Zodiac Saint Seiya having premiered on Netflix in July of 2019. There's even been talks of a live-action film adaptation on Netflix stated for release sometime next year in 2023. As of 2022,
which already came out already,
Saint Seiya
and
manga has
that's
sold
pretty good.
over 50 million copies, making it one of the best
That's even more at
manga
this point.
series of all
I think it's like
time,
17,000
with
at
the
this
original
point.
manga and anime finding success internationally
Like 17
across
million at
Asia,
this point, so it's like,
Europe,
yeah, they-
Africa, and Latin America. And for a variety of different reasons, the series has had a surprisingly large and growing cult following in Southern and Latin American-speaking countries, which has greatly contributed to its ongoing longevity and success overseas. Let me explain.
Viva los caballeros del Zodiaco. Yep.
Outside of Japan, Saint Seiya was met with exponential success overseas, and more specifically, the series' largest fan base was dominated by fans from Latin America and Spanish-speaking countries such as Costa Rica, El Salvador, Mexico, and Nicaragua. There are several theories as to why the anime resonated so strongly with its Latin American audience, many of which are not explicitly stated. But from my research, I was able to infer some of the most popular explanations as to why the anime resonated so profoundly with South and Central American audiences. Unlike the early standard dubbing practices we'd see in English dubs, Saint Seiya was localized in Latin America with very minimal censorship. These more relaxed translations made it very popular among teens and children, but also caused somewhat of a stir among adults and conservative news groups. However, most fans praised the dub for staying as close as they could to the original source material. With networks and cable TV not having broadcast a lot of anime in the late 80s, the caliber of Saint Seiya was unmatched. It was pretty unique from the few anime that had been dubbed, with the exception of Dragon Ball releasing sometime after. The structure of the series kept Latin American fans on the edge of their seats and eager for new episodes to air, and has been best described as an action-oriented, dramatic telenovela made for kids.
Yeah.
The show was remembered fondly for its catchy theme song and stellar voice cast, and its spreading popularity in this region was akin to that of the Pokemania craze of North America in the late 90s. And with Catholicism being a popular religion, many fans could relate to the show's themes of religion and spirituality, coupled with its mythological inspired elements.
Yeah.
To better help me wrap my brain around how meaningful the series was to people on a personal level, I asked viewers of the Latin American Saint Seiya community to explain in their own words why the show meant so much to them, and there seemed to be a shared sentiment on the show's positive influence.
Saint Seiya wasn't the first anime to be successful in Brazil. There were anime and tokusatsu shows in the 60s and 70s that were the first ones, but Saint Seiya was the first anime for a new generation. Being broadcasted for the first time in 1994, no other anime was nearly as successful or in the mainstream at the time as Saint Seiya became. Sure, it was aimed at the boys. Sailor Moon wouldn't be on until 1996, but every single kid knew what it was.
It was a different thing. When I watched it, all I'd known previously was Dragon Ball. Saint Seiya had a different kind of teamwork and friendship that felt special. The emotions in the music just complemented it a lot more. Plus, characters had some nice developments and depth. Seiya had ambitions that became a mission, Hyuga had duty that became friendship, Shiryu had pride that became honor, Shun had innocence that became love, and Ikki had confusion that became heroism. They had dimensions.
I know this sounds absurd, but Saint Seiya was and is part of our national identity. Back then, most of us didn't understand that anime was foreign, and while there was TV aimed at kids produced nationally, there wasn't a whole lot, so anime like Saint Seiya filled this cultural void.
Well, Saint Seiya was the very first show where my demographic, feminine men, had any sort of positive representation. Andromeda Shun was the first character that I, as a child, recognized was like me. It was quite revolutionary for its time, to be honest. It was just everything about him. Not just his feminine appearance, but his personality as well. Being of peaceful nature, soft-mannered, and disliking violence. Shun being one of the main characters.
But he's also one of the
one
fucking
of the good guys was a big deal. Feminine men were often portrayed as villainous in the media.
There are a number of reasons as to why Latin American communities resonated so deeply with Saint Seiya, but its lasting impact is ever so apparent in the passionate words of fans who have been keeping the series into the mainstream since its initial debut. For whatever reason, the formula just stuck and completely changed the anime experience for generations of anime fans alike.
Hey,
it's impossible to
that's
deny
on
the
deck
impact
us.
of this series, but even after my thorough explanation of what made it so special, I still get the feeling that my core audience isn't entirely convinced. A lot of you may be thinking, well, I'm an anime fan, I didn't care much about this show, why didn't I remember anything about it? To be honest, I wouldn't blame anyone who still isn't convinced, because I mean, seeing is believing, and if you haven't seen the outward influence of its success, how can you possibly believe in the supposed immense staying power and constant praise from others? Well, if you're in Asia, Europe, or even Latin and South America, Saint Seiya's notoriety may not come as much of a surprise to you, but if you reside in North America, it might be a different
And
story.
also English-speaking part of the
Unfortunately,
world.
for reasons outside of our control, Saint Seiya was generally not as renowned in North America in
Revealed a
comparison to other countries. The love for the series and fan response was nowhere near as impactful as anime such as Digimon, Pokemon, Sailor Moon, or even Dragon Ball. A country with arguably the world's foremost economic and military power, with a jarring amount of influence on modern-day pop culture and celebrity, hadn't had the greatest introduction to the likes of Saint Seiya. Its absence of a North American audience, despite its growth, really says something about the series as a whole. I can't imagine Saint Seiya having an even
It's a
greater
losing
impact
fight here
than
in
it
the United
has
States.
now, and its impact is already quite massive. The possibilities of where its success could have taken it if it had that proper introduction to North America is pretty profound. Had the series gotten the same treatment as similar anime that had blown up in the West, it could have potentially overtaken the boom of early 90s anime, which would have really
Yeah, but the problem
altered
is,
not
it's
only
like,
our early
oh
perceptions
god,
of anime,
they would have to
also
edit
could
the
have
fuck out of
changed
it. And they would've-
exactly when anime really took off culturally in North America. It could have had so much potential. So, how is it that dubbing companies could have passed up on such an opportunity to make the show even more highly regarded, thus bringing in more profit? What if I told you that this poor introduction to this anime was by no fault of the series, but rather can be chalked up to a horrendous localization process and ultimately an issue of poor timing? With all we knew about early English dubs, a mistake like this wouldn't really come as a surprise. But with how much successful anime had been imported into the USA in the early 90s, only some years after the release of Saint Seiya, one could only wonder why not as much consideration was put into its localization process.
Hey, what's up, Doc? How you doing?
Though Saint Seiya proved to be immensely popular around the globe, my memories with the series, if I'm being frank, were few and far between.
That's good to
Ultimately,
hear.
it was never a show that really stood out to me, nor would I have ever identified
Oh,
it
but
as
the billing's
something
good.
groundbreaking when I first watched
got done with
English
the-
dub back in 2003.
We just got the-
This
with
is
the
something
chest- with
quite
the
a few
chest
people
piece,
living in
so-
Canada and the United States would agree with. But by no means did my lack of interest in the series imply that Saint Seiya was some horribly uninspired anime, but rather, unlike fans outside of North America, we never got to see the real series in all of its raw, unfiltered glory. The failure of Saint Seiya in the United States and Canada becomes painfully clear once you examine the arduous journey the series had to navigate through in order
Yeah,
to
we're
make it
watching
to
this
English
video.
speakers' television screens. There are a few key events that contributed to its demise surrounding terrible localizations and generally poor timing. In July of 2002, ADV Films announced that they'd purchased the rights to releasing Saint Seiya in North America through a sub-license agreement they shared with the French studio Deke Entertainment. In the United States, Deke had sold 40 episodes of the series to Cartoon Network under the new name of Knights of the Zodiac. This dub would be produced and edited in Toronto, Ontario, and would also go on to air in Canada under the children's television network called YTV. The series made its North American debut on August 30th of 2003. I grew up watching this series, and I can say with all certainty that this dub was an absolute nightmare.
Yes,
Watching
it is.
the dub a second time around, I'm reminded of why the series never stood out to me. No love was put into staying true to the original source material, and it wound up becoming a horribly produced low-bar dub. Over the years, Knights of the Zodiac became infamous not for its original story, but for the memes that were born from all of the terrible dubbing changes that had been put into place. The dub contained a lot of unnecessary video edits where multiple episodes would be cut and pasted together, along with unfunny jokes used to fill in serious dialogue in moments where there should be silence. These alterations, in turn,
Yeah, sounds about
created
right for
plot
dubs.
holes and inconsistencies with the original story. It also came with an unusually high level of censorship in terms of its depictions of violence, which was strange
Oh,
because
yeah.
at that time,
Everyone was just
censorship
bleeding.
practices were becoming much more relaxed, so it was clear they had
Yeah,
no
yeah.
understanding of who their target audience was supposed to be. Blood was recolored, and any mention of death was completely omitted and rephrased disguised as going to another dimension or falling asleep, which only further added confusion to the story. Character names were changed and personalities were altered, such as Cygnus Hyoga, known as Swan Hyoga in the dub, now suddenly having a stereotypical surfer boy accent. And finally, the once iconic Pegasus Fantasy theme song was now replaced with a cover of the Flock of Seagulls song I Ran by American 80s rock band Bowling for Soup, which was not a bad song, but that's entirely besides the point. Of course, none of these changes went over well, and Cartoon Network wound up pulling the series from air due to abysmal ratings after only 32 episodes in April of 2004. While in Canada, all 40 episodes aired before the series' cancellation. Of the 40 episodes that have been dubbed, only 28 have ever had a DVD release, which means over the years, the remaining 12 episodes are now considered to be lost media.
Yeah, and what's good is that they've been finding it more and more recently, so yeah, cool.
And Deke closing its doors in 2008, the DVD release of this dub is extremely hard to come by. I actually remember watching a few episodes of the Deke dub here and there, and would occasionally catch the end of episodes when waiting for other anime to air. But had I known the remaining 12 dubbed episodes would have someday become lost media, I probably would have utilized my VHS recorder a lot more often and a lot more frequently. Though I do remember recording partial episodes of Saint Seiya, sadly, when I recently took a look through my VHS collection, none could be found. Perhaps it was on one of the tapes I'd thrown out before I moved. Fortunately, in recent years, Lost Media community members had managed to recover a few VHS recordings of the lost episodes in question. Of the fully recovered episodes, 10 episodes remain completely lost to this day. But unfortunately, the mishandling did not stop here. We also need to discuss the failure of the ADV dub. Parallel to the Deke release, ADV Films also decided to produce their own uncut version of
Hey, Kari, how you doing?
opting to use the original Saint Seiya name.
How are you doing?
Was
Hopefully you're
also
doing well.
released in
Welcome for joining.
2003.
Well,
This series was
welcome
produced
to
using a
the
different
stream.
voice cast and was recorded in the Houston, Texas area. The direct-to-DVD release occurred from October 21st, 2003 to May of 2005. While they had intended on completing the series, they were only able to sublicense a total of 60 episodes from their previous deal with Deke Entertainment, therefore also rendering this second dub of Saint Seiya as unfinished. So once again, fans in 2003 were still unable to get a complete English dub of the series. And though there was now an uncut DVD version, the few fans that the series had at the
it's
time
rough.
were still robbed of a satisfying conclusion to an already hard-to-watch anime they'd been keeping up with through DVD
Also, too, it's like
releases.
there's also too, like,
From
oh
what I gathered
god.
from the few clips left online, while the ADV dub kept in the violence and didn't retain the same major edits of the Deke dub, it still had a handful of its own issues. The script dialogue was sadly somewhat awkward, including odd line delivery from characters whose voices didn't seem to fit. Their attempt at rectifying Deke's mistake of veering too far from the source material was still a very half-baked attempt at best. As a result, the ADV dub gave rise to a few of its own memes. Furthermore, despite having more episodes dubbed, it only received a direct-to-DVD release,
Not just that,
relegating
like,
it
the
into
DVDs were
obscurity in
released or, like,
comparison to
what
its
were only
Deke
built for.
counterpart, which aired on television that same year. Without
Well,
having
not only that,
watched
the
the
problem
uncut
is like
ADV
each
dub,
DVD
it's hard to say
was
how
like
close
4
it stood
episodes
to
for
the
like
original
$30. Like,
series,
yeah,
but based
we're
on the
not doing
fact that
that.
they were only able to sublicense 60 episodes with no renewal, it may be safe to say that the straight-to-DVD release was also met with poor sales and low visibility. All in
Well,
all,
lucky
each
a few
dub
times.
catered to a completely
What are you
different
doing? Come
audience.
by. So I stopped by.
Further confused
Well, well,
fans
thank
when
you.
they
I
released
really do
both
appreciate
dubs
that.
simultaneously. And this would eventually lead to another problem contributing to its failure in North America that I would like to refer to as the dreadful dub confusions. Imagine you're a 10-year-old kid living in North America. It's 2003 and you catch a glimpse of a show on television called Knights of the Zodiac. It seems really cool and exciting, but you always seem to miss the new episodes when they air. And because of this, you have trouble following the storyline. So you decide to go to the video store with your parents one day, and when browsing the aisles, you spot a DVD with characters from that show with the cool knights, except it's now labeled Saint Seiya the Uncut Version. You wind up convincing your parents to buy it, and as soon as you hit play on your DVD player, you're surprised to discover that the anime is entirely different from what you watched on television. You're now disappointed to find that the storyline, voice acting, and edits aren't the same, leaving you pretty confused as to what's going on. And on top of this, both the TV series and this new dub in your possession succession have no concluding episode to wrap up the series. I know adult anime fans of the early 2000s would have caught on to this difference, but imagine experiencing this as a child. What makes this worse is the fact
Also, I wasn't aware that
the
she's on
dub
Saint
and
Seiya.
the
It's
DVD dub
yeah, it
have
is
the
interesting.
ABV logo
We're
slapped
going
on
through
the
we're going
bottom
through
of
the
their
history because
respective
I host a
packaging.
podcast about
Despite
it.
being
So
the uncut version, this could have been an easy mistake for not only children, but their parents to make upon purchasing. On top of this, finding a DVD release of the original Deke dub was very rare. I was 10 years old in 2003. I can't be the only one who sees a problem with this. Lastly, and arguably the most crucial factor
man,
that
if I had
led
watched
to
the
the
channel
rise
like I
of
had
Saint
in
Seiya
Russian.
North America
Yeah.
was this series being released well after its prime. The series was doomed from the start,
Yep.
and not because it aired on dead time slots, but because the Deke dub had been brought over well after it would have been considered new and innovative in the world of anime. Had the
Better animes
licensing
have already
companies
fucking
followed the
were already
examples of
out.
other international companies and released Saint Seiya around the same time they had localized popular 80s anime like Gundam and Dragon Ball, the series would have fared much better and would have been just as revolutionary to children who hadn't yet been exposed to such a variety of shonen anime. It was too late for the series as a whole to have had a strong grasp on the North American market, and its style was no longer relevant to the times. By 2003, we had already been exposed to anime that had been inspired by Saint Seiya before Saint Seiya could even make its debut.
Oh yeah.
How could an anime that was considered revolutionary by 80s standards be expected to compete with a time slot of modern anime like Full Metal Alchemist, Inuyasha, and Bleach that by then had already mastered the Saint Seiya formula of what made it so special and improved on it for a younger generation? Aside from the horrible dub deterring my interest from the series, there wasn't anything about the anime I hadn't already seen that would have been able to hold my attention. However, nearly 20 years since the Deke dub had aired, the original anime was finally redubbed a third time by the company Sentai Filmworks, the company responsible for the CGI Saint Seiya dub known as Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac. Both the original anime and CGI series were released on Netflix in 2019,
Which wasn't
making
good.
Sentai Filmworks the first company to have dubbed the full 114 episode series into English. It took over 20
Now we
years
need
to get a
Hades, but
complete
I don't
dub
know
of
at this
an
point.
anime that
Especially
had originally
since
been released
it got
in the
now
80s.
it's
This time around, the Sentai Filmworks dub had
this was like,
and was much
well,
more true to the original source material. Throughout its rocky history in North America, the series still managed to see some moderate success and has a decently sized cult following. There are definitely fans of the anime in Canada and the USA, but the difference it could have made for those fans had it not faced so many problems is certainly something to think about. The failures of Knights of the Zodiac is almost historical in the sense that it is the only Japanese anime to fail in the United States, whilst becoming a mega hit in Asia, Europe, and South America, a fate that Deke CEO Andy Hayward at the time couldn't have ever predicted. In the end, it all
oh yeah,
came down
he
to
famously
two
said this
terribly
series
English
is
dubs
not
and
destined to
poorly
fail at
timed
all.
release
It's
of the
like,
series long after its window of opportunity for it to thrive had passed.
Oh,
It was a
no.
cartoon made in the 80s being introduced to a, by then, well-seasoned anime audience of the early 2000s. Saint Seiya's North American failure was a huge missed opportunity and a formula that had been doomed from the start. Its influence, though small, hasn't gone unnoticed. And with the entire original series being fully licensed and released by Sentai Filmworks, along with the CGI project, new fans and a newfound appreciation for the series have emerged. And while this doesn't make up for its disastrous first impression and 20-year limbo, it still serves as somewhat of a bittersweet resolution to a time in history when English anime enthusiasts
yeah, it's so
missed out on
insane. It's so
something
insane.
great.
It's so insane to see that. It's like almost it don't took them, and it took them almost like 18 years for them to finally dub the entire series, and I'm like, oh.
So now you're completely up to speed with all things Saint Seiya. You know about the anime's inception, its international success, the cultural impact it had on the animation industry, and why it had such a visibly large fan base in parts of Latin America. You're even well versed on the reasons why the series had failed in North America. Saint Seiya eventually found moderate success through its spin-offs, redubs, and a handful of media that's followed since. I feel if not for the 2019 CGI adaptation, we probably probably would have never seen a full English dub of the original
Yeah.
anime. Sentai Filmworks, in collaboration with Netflix, redubbed the series shortly after its CGI counterpart, which was the network's attempt at reviving the series and reintroducing it to old and new fans as a palate cleanser for any future adaptations they had up their sleeve. And lo and behold, in 2021, it was announced that in another joint venture with Netflix, an upcoming live-action movie.
Well, this isn't true. It did the show, the
Saint
movie.
Seiya, Knights of the Zodiac, and was slated
Yeah, that
for
was actually
release
pretty good.
sometime in 2023. Saint Seiya was now
Made me
following
want to go
suit
to
with
America a good
Hollywood's
chunk of
recent
so.
tradition of adapting
So
a
we
well-loved
worked.
anime series into a live-action spin-off. Whether or not this move will help to reignite interest in the franchise for North American audiences,
And the movie's actually
only
pretty
time will
good.
tell.
I
But
mean,
what if I told you this was not the first?
hold on, like, the movie's actually not that. It's actually not that bad. Like I said, if you ever heard my podcast, I'm like, look, it's a great, it's a great like 5 out of 10 movie. It's not the greatest movie in the world, but it's like it could have been gone a lot worse. You know, this was me. You want to go marathon a good chunk of it to LML. So yeah, it did its job. I really do appreciate that. Let's continue.
Time, echoes of an American live-action adaptation had circulated. What if I told you, just like the potential Sailor Moon had of becoming a hybrid adaptation of live-action and American animation, that at some point, Saint Seiya had also fallen into similar waters of becoming a shell of its former self?
Oh
The
yes.
issues behind
Here
its
we go.
dubs, you may not find this concept to be too far-fetched, especially since it went a whole 20+ years without a solid English dub. During my time investigating the live-action Sailor Moon pilot, my attention was pulled towards a similarly related piece of lost media, shrouded in an equal amount of mystery. In 1994, a whole 9 years before the release of the first English Saint Seiya dub, something had been brewing inside the studios of Renaissance Atlantic, Bandai, and Toei Animation. Something that, had it been given the green light, could have forever altered the show's perception to North American audiences.
For better or for worse.
The year
That's the best
was
placement for this.
1993, and the hit series Mighty Morphin Power
Oh yeah,
Rangers was the
like I said,
highest
it's
rated show
great,
on
but like
broadcast
not like the
television.
greatest
Power
movie in
Rangers
the
was the
world.
brainchild of Haim Saban and his company Saban Entertainment. It was a heavily edited, Americanized live-action version of the original Japanese series known as Kyoryu Sentai Zero Ranger. The show was a blend of original Japanese fighting sequences and action shots merged together with reshot, non-action scenes with an all-American cast, recreating the show from the ground up in a formula they continued to use throughout the series' later incarnations. The show was produced as a joint
Great.
venture between
I like the
Saban
fact
of
that the
Saban
3D was not
Toei
that good, but
Animation, and their American division known as Renaissance Atlantic. Despite being overly predictable, corny, and somewhat formulaic, Power Rangers was a huge hit in North
I talking about Legend of the Sanctuary, or are you talking about the live
Its
action
toy
movie?
division, Bandai Entertainment, has made over $20 million off of merchandise sales alone. American distributors, in response to the success of the series, were now on the hunt for the next best-selling Japanese import to
The three?
introduce
Oh yeah.
consumers. Frank Ward, former Bandai
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
Renaissance
Yeah,
Atlantic
yeah. Because the thing
president,
is,
wanted
because like the thing is, like you said, 2019. Yeah, Legend of the Sanctuary. Yeah, because the reason why you said 2019, like no, that came out in 2016. It was way before that when I actually saw it in theaters. I actually saw that movie in theaters. I'm mixing. Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, no, the CG movie is great. I love the CGI movie. It's been I love it a lot. You know, it's like it's the thing I always say. If you want to get like the a la carte of Saint Seiya, that's like the best. That's like the best way of doing it. But yeah, 2000, the 2016 movie is really good. Yeah, and I remember, like I said, I saw it because I live near the border. Like you know, like I'm sorry for the immersion break, but it's like I live near the border, but and and I get and I used and you know I have like dual citizenship. I lived in both Mexico and United States, and you know from time to time, you know I get to go down there, and like that was one of the few times where I went to, where I decided to like tread down there, and you know it was well worth it.
to take a similar approach of westernizing
Oh, that's
Japanese
yeah.
media for an American
And you gotta realize
audience
something.
by
Like in Mexico, it's like,
remaking
oh,
existing IPs
it was
that had been
we
originally produced
ate
by
that shit
Toei
up literally.
Animation. It's hard to say exactly what shows were in talks of getting their own adaptations, but perhaps the most widely known concept to have surfaced was that of Renaissance Atlantic's attempt at producing an animated and live-action version of the popular anime series Pretty Soldier Sailor Moon. Eventually, the deal between Renaissance and Toei Animation had fallen through after turning down their concept for Sailor Moon in favor of Toei having their anime dubbed into English rather than continuing with the plan of creating Americanized adaptations. After a few years of silence, this once private proof of concept eventually leaked to the public and was later dubbed Saban Moon. But where does that leave those other
There's
failed
fairly niche in
projects?
Canada where I am,
Some
but
of
most
the
people still know
archives
like
of
that's
Renaissance Atlantic are
yeah,
TV
you know.
novels, elevator pitches, and full-blown pilot episodes of live-action anime adaptations, all hidden away with limited access. The Saban Moon pilot was one of the earliest known live-action spin-offs produced by Renaissance Atlantic, and since my last investigation, we now not only have a bunch of answered questions to that mystery, but also now have the full pilot in its entirety. And though it's currently the most popular piece of lost media held at the company, it's actually not the only Americanized adaptation that's managed to slip through the cracks and into the public eye. As a matter of fact, there exist remnants of a live-action adaptation from the anime Saint Seiya, an IP Toei and Bandai had exclusive rights to that had been produced sometime in 1994 in tandem with Saban Moon. All that exists of this series is in the form of a 20-second trailer that had been
Spoilers, they
circulating
actually
for
found
some
this.
time
And we're gonna see it. If you'll stick around, we'll see it.
Much is still unknown about this lost pilot, but we do know that the project was quickly shot down by Masami Kurumada, the creator of Saint Seiya, and the idea was scrapped altogether. In a 2003 interview with Pierre Jenner for the 97th issue of Anime Land magazine, Masami Kurumada had this to say about the pilot project.
Some years ago, a project about a Saint Seiya live-action movie came to my office. In Hollywood, there was a pilot of 15 minutes, but the essence of the series was not respected. The designs and realization made us think about the Ninja Turtles and the names were changed. The project was abandoned because they couldn't obtain a satisfactory result.
Aside from it being live action, it's hard to say how close they would have kept it to the original story, but Kurumada noted that the project had been abandoned and that the essence of the series was not respected. To this
That
day,
makes sense.
the
He's
full
very
Sailor
much
Moon
like
pilot hasn't seen the
he's
light of
very
day.
involved with
Aside
it.
from Kurumada, the only people to have witnessed the pilot in full are those who worked at Renaissance Atlantic, Bandai, and Toei Animation during its production. All that's been leaked to the public was a 20-second trailer, and the project is considered to be a part of lost media. And curiously, it was during my time researching in the Library of Congress that this Starstorm pilot had fallen onto my radar. An entry for it was listed in the copyright catalog database when I had looked for titles under Renaissance Atlantic. Unfortunately, digging deeper into this, I had discovered that the 15-minute pilot hadn't been submitted to the catalog, but rather the 20-second trailer that had been circulating online. Why was the trailer here but not the full pilot episode? Perhaps the pilot had been misfiled at the facility? There were so many questions beginning to unravel, and there was just so much overlap between the Sailor Moon and Saint Seiya pilots that I just knew Starstorm would be next in my search. With the resources I had managed to pull during my investigation of all three companies, it seemed like the perfect avenue to unearthing more lost finds regarding this live-action pilot. And with this collection of leads at my disposal, it was time to begin my deep dive investigation into the mysteries of Starstorm. So now that you know about the origins of this mysterious trailer, what exactly do I hope to find in my investigation? Ultimately, my main goal is to retrieve a clean copy of the lost 15-minute Starstorm pilot, and, if possible, any extra information pertaining to the pilot's creation, whether it be behind-the-scenes footage, pages from the show Bible, or even some sort of contact with the cast and crew. But before I could dive into my search, I had to make sure all of my ducks were in a row. I wanted to make sure I had a comprehensive list of all my previous previous sources that would be relevant to this new investigation. Unlike my previous hunts, there was a lot less readily available information regarding this media, so I figured if I made a clear map of my leads, everything would run much smoother. Obviously, the most important people of interest were employees I'd previously interviewed that had worked with Renaissance Atlantic from 1993 to 1994. I would retrace my steps and see if Rocky Solotov of Toonmakers would be able to shed any light on this project. Having worked with the company in 1994 on the live-action Sailor Moon project, it's possible he may have heard whispers of this or other live-action adaptations through passing conversations. Another individual I felt it would be worth speaking to was Ellen Prince, who from 1994 to 1997 worked as a development and production executive for Renaissance Atlantic. With her having overseen the creative development of over 20 live-action television series, it was possible she could have been present for the production of the Starstorm pilot. In my last investigation, I had been given Ellen's contact information through an outside source and was given permission to call her. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I was unable to get a hold of her. Perhaps this time would be different. As there was a high chance of crossover, I also thought it would be relevant to reinvestigate the company Deke Entertainment. In my last documentary, it turned out that some elements from the 1994 pilot of Sailor Moon had been recycled back into the Deke dub of the anime series. With the licensing of Saint Seiya also having been acquired by Deke, it wouldn't be so far-fetched to assume that there's a strong likelihood that, just like with Sailor Moon, elements from Starstorm could have also been recycled back into its Deke dub. With Starstorm being created in 1994, I would specifically need to look for leads who worked at Deke Entertainment around that same time frame. Also, as a bit of a bonus to my search, I decided that if I managed to get in touch with employees who worked at Deke, I would make sure to also inquire about the lost episodes from the 2003 Deke dub. It might not yield the results I'm looking for, but there could be a possibility that someone at the company still held on to those tapes. Masami Kuramada, the designer of Saint Seiya, was someone I almost tried to contact, but I ultimately decided against it and removed his name as a potential lead. It would have been a perfect choice. Not only were the chances
that would have been great, but no.
But I had a strong feeling that though he saw
Kurama Sensei is just swimming in money right now, and he won't have time for
like
anybody.
Possession of. Based on a later interview with Anime Land magazine, Kuramada had done a private screening for Pierre Jenner. Based on what he recalled from the video shown, it can be assumed that Pierre was only shown the trailer, as much of what he said was everything we had already seen from the 20-second clip. But again, I can't say for certain whether or not the pilot had been shown in its
bless her for
entirety,
thinking
and
she
then
could.
basing my
Yeah.
assumption purely off of what had been echoed in the article. Perhaps if my other sources lead me to a dead end, this would be something I'd end up revisiting. Before we continue, I'd like to ask that you please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. These documentaries support media talk in the 1994, but hoped that one of them would lead to the answers I'd been seeking. My first order of business was to track down any employees who had worked at Deke Entertainment both in the early 90s and around 2003. Surely I'd encounter someone who knew of the 10 Lost Knights of the Zodiac episodes. Maybe they'd turn out to be hidden away at an ex-employee's storage locker. Or maybe, just maybe, someone at the company knew something about the 1994 live-action adaptation. Maybe they would be able to tell me whether or not some elements had been recycled back into the Deke dub. After hours of searching, I ended up finding a handful of names in association with Deke Entertainment, but these sources had little to no digital footprint, and while some of them were barely active on social media, the ones who did have their work posted online provided little to no way of contacting them. I did attempt to send private messages to some, but unfortunately after waiting a few weeks, I had to call it quits. However, all hope wasn't lost, and of the ex-employees listed, I did manage to stumble upon the contact information of a key figure known as Shannon Nettleton. When her name had popped up, I was pleasantly surprised, as I had recognized her as being the current vice president of production at Mattel, the company responsible for the popular American doll line known as Barbie. Examining her profile, I learned that Shannon had over 20 years of industry experience, dating back to her time as a coordinator for Warner Brothers Animation. I had no idea she would have been connected to Deke, and was surprised to learn she had spent 13 years at the company, starting off as an associate producer from 1996 to 2000, only to move up to vice president of production and post from 2005 to 2009. When the company had closed, she even transitioned to working at Wild Brain, formerly DHX Media, a company that had acquired Deke Entertainment when it merged with the company Cookie Jar Group. She had quite the impressive resume, and out of all my sources, had arguably the most experience working at Deke, and fortunately for me, had her contact information open to the public. So I very confidently sent out an email, and I figured at the time something would come to pass, but I was sorely mistaken. Weeks went by in total silence. I was somewhat naive in my hopefulness that Shannon would respond. As vice president of production at a multi-million-dollar company like Mattel, she must get random inquiries on an almost regular basis. It's possible there was just no time to get to my email, or perhaps she just wasn't interested, and I wouldn't fault her for that in the slightest. Even though I had felt disappointment in the outcome, it was still worth reaching out regardless. This whole thing was proving to be much harder than I thought. Trying to find new people of interest seemed to be the biggest uphill battle, and with every email sent out, time was lost spent waiting for answers in between. But I wasn't ready to just give up, and instead, I decided to move straight to my list of old leads. The list of employees who had worked either with or at Renaissance Atlantic, Ellen Prince and Rocky Solotov. I still had Rocky's number, and had actually spoken with him quite recently. As for Ellen, though I was unable to reach her in my previous investigation, she did mention through a third party that she was open to having a phone call with me, so I figured I'd try again. In a roundabout way, I had come to find out that the number I was given to contact Ellen was in fact the wrong number. This whole time I had been calling someone else. All the while, Ellen must have been wondering why an interview never happened. So I did exactly what I do best at times like this, and after several hours of mind-numbing investigation, I wound up unearthing her real phone number. Now, I will tell you that both interviews had played out quite similarly, and to my surprise, in the end, Rocky and Ellen were unable to provide any information on the aforementioned Starstorm pilot. But in a strange twist of fate, I will tell you that what I had learned from our conversations was like unearthing a Pandora's box of information.
No, it's like the Pandora's boxes in fucking Saint Seiya, where it's like where they keep the art, where they keep the
closely guarded company secrets, and discussions on anime that had their own plans at live-action adaptations outside of Saint Seiya and Sailor Moon. Information that would only muddy the waters of this current investigation. So for now, I've decided to close the book on that part of my search temporarily, as the information that was retrieved from these sit-downs are deserving of their own documentaries. Let's just say if I shared all of this right now, it would no longer be a feature on Saint Seiya, and would completely veer off into a different direction. But when the time is right, hopefully once I'm able to wrap up this series, everything will fall into place. Let's just say there was so much more to Renaissance Atlantic than we know, and had things played out differently, they would have had arguably the largest influence on our early perception of anime as a whole. As a last-ditch effort in my search, I did in fact wind up trying to reach out to Masami Kurimata to confirm whether
God,
was in fact in possession
the
of the
balls on this lady
pilot, or if what he had shown Pierre Jenner was actually just the 20-second trailer. And as you can imagine, I wasn't even able to get close. Not a phone number, not an email, absolutely nothing. With him being such a prominent figure, just like Shannon, getting access to someone like that
the guy is
was
working
not
his
going
ass
to be
off.
easy. And I knew even doing a deep scrub of the internet wouldn't get me anywhere. The only morsel of evidence I was able to obtain turned out to be information totally unrelated to my case. Ellen could not remember what the production of Starstorm was like, as she had been busy working on another anime adaptation at the time, and Rocky, while working with Frank on independent projects, couldn't recall any pilots relating to Saint Seiya. Their information was overall valuable, but not something that could be used to further my search. I felt as though this was possibly the end of the line in my investigation, and I was ready to accept defeat. A couple of weeks had passed since I had thrown in the towel on my lost media investigation. I was so sure that my efforts would have had some sort of resolve, and that I would have been able to leave my search with new details surrounding the lost pilot. Maybe I went into this situation a little too optimistic. I mean, it had been about 28 years since the pilot's inception, and as dedicated as the Saint Seiya fandom was, little to no information regarding the pilot had ever seemed to surface.
Yeah, that's a problem. Like, at the time, there was nothing.
Magazine and of course, the 20-second trailer. And we can't even be sure that the person who uploaded it had any involvement in the project. But perhaps I made the right decision when I let it be known that the subject of my upcoming documentary would be on the original Starstorm pilot. Because as a result of my declaration, I received a number of tips that seemingly by magic led me down a whole new path and restarted my quest for the lost 15-minute tape. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I received 3 separate tips telling me to search for a woman by the name of Marlene Sharp, who was rumored to
We've
have
interviewed
worked
her
with
in
Frank
my
Ward at
podcast.
Renaissance Atlantic sometime in the early 90s. In the tip-offs I'd received, I had been told that on her official website, I could find a high-quality version of a demo reel featuring all of Renaissance Atlantic's works. And apparently, this reel had included the Starstorm trailer. I was ecstatic. Just when I thought my search was over, my prayers had been answered by a few kind viewers eager to help push the investigation along. This time, I wouldn't let a few bumps in the road deter me from my search. I was directed to Pink Poodle Productions, Marlene's official website. According to what I had read, Marlene worked as a media producer, writer, and strategist in Hollywood. I scrolled through her homepage and looked through her body of work, and at the very bottom of that page was a heading that read, Renaissance Atlantic Demo Reel. Under that heading was a small paragraph that read, You've got the power. In honor of Power Rangers 30th anniversary, here is a special presentation from the Pink Poodle Vault. Sing along with these great TV show theme songs of the late 90s to early 2000s. Many thanks to my exceptional former boss, Frank Ward, for the chance to play a role in his action hero empire. Directly underneath the short paragraph was an embedded video, the demo reel I had been informed about that contained the trailer for the Starstorm pilot. And they were right. The reel, produced by Marlene Sharp and a man named Salvador Litvak, showcased many of the works popular at Renaissance Atlantic, including a trailer of the Lost Team Angel series, revealing its never-before-seen logo, and more importantly, the 20-second trailer to Starstorm. I pondered Marlene's role at the company, and whether or not she might have knowledge that could help me locate this missing pilot.
She's a really
Since
nice
she
lady, by the
produced
way.
the
I've
reel,
interviewed her. Like I said,
experienced
I've
a
interviewed her before.
simultaneous rush of panic
She's
and adrenaline.
incredibly
Whatever the
nice.
result,
I should
had
like
to
hit her
reach
up again
out.
after
And in
now that
contrast to my
now the
previous
information
search,
has
it was
it has
much easier to obtain
now
Marlene's contact information. So I put
now the
her
information is
on
like now
site and
readily
decided to contact
available
her
and
on
it's like
Instagram. This
alright.
method of contact appeared to be the fastest of all options for reaching her, and that very next day, Marlene had responded. From losing all hope in my search to receiving tip-offs about a possible person of interest, I found myself chatting back and forth with Marlene Sharp, a woman who worked at Renaissance Atlantic alongside Frank Ward many years ago. After a brief exchange of messages between myself and Marlene, we agreed to set up a call for a more in-depth exchange about her time working at Renaissance Atlantic. I was quite interested to see what I would learn from our conversation. I had finally succeeded in getting in touch with a fresh lead who actually responded back and was just as eager to set up an interview. Was it conceivable that she had a hand at Starstorm's creation? How did this reel find its way into the public? And would she possibly have a copy or any info regarding the lost tape's whereabouts? I was
She does
excited
not
to
have
hear what
shit.
she had to say.
But
What was your role during your time with Renaissance Atlantic?
My role at the company, I started as a temp, worked as a temp for a couple weeks, and then I was hired as an assistant. And then the only other employee of the company, but there was Frank Ward, there was a director of development named Danny Dave, and then there was me, the assistant. Danny left the company, and then it was just Frank and me. So I called myself director of development. I think he still thought of me as an assistant. So there you go. You can ponder that for a little bit.
Do you have any stories that stand out from
Yeah,
your
she
time working with the team?
Yes, and therapy has not erased any of those stories. They're still very vivid in my mind. I worked for Frank as his only employee for about 3.5 years. So I worked Frank, Danny, and I in the Beverly Hills office of Renaissance Atlantic for about 1.5 years, and then an additional 3.5 or so.
Here's the thing, she's a huge
What was your
jokester,
favorite show to
and-
have produced while
and
working?
she
I
but
wasn't really a producer. I mean, I did produce stuff. I never got producer credit while I was there. I think the best credit I ever got was production manager. So I did uncredited producing, and one project that I really enjoyed working on, it's called Little Dracula, and the cartoon was already produced, and it was something that Frank owned. Some rights had reverted back to him during the time that I worked for him. So it was produced long before I worked there. But the rights reverted back to him, and he wanted to get the credits in the series changed to reflect that. So I had to work with a post-production house to go in and recut footage and reconfigure the credits so that Frank became executive producer. He did not have an executive producer credit until the rights reverted back to him, and so we had to change things around. But I love that show. It's really brilliant. I think it only lasted one season maybe, but it's by far one of my favorite cartoons ever, based on a children's book series, Little Dracula.
Yeah.
Are there any keepsakes that you would be able to share with us for the documentary? For example, photos of yourself along with the rest of the crew?
This is so crazy, but I do not have... I cannot find any photos of myself working at Renaissance Atlantic. However, I do have a lot of pictures, or not a lot, a handful of pictures of the empty office. And I have this one picture. I will hold it up. So I must have gotten roses at the office one day. This was during the days then it was just Frank and me. And if you can see, like way in the background here, these dolls, they're basically redressed Barbies. Those are the dolls that were redesigned. We used Barbies as models, but we did costume designs for Team Angel, and we had them in the office. We had a set of the main cast in their regular teenager outfits, and then like in action mode. And then you can see the other toys in the office. I got a lot of things from Frank when he closed up shop. So again, no cast or crew pictures, no pictures of people, just pictures of two empty offices. But there are some cool toys in the background, so I'll try to scan them, send them to you.
Do you remember what it was like to work alongside Frank Ward?
Yes, I remember, and let's leave it at that.
Yes.
We'll leave it at that.
She was a temp,
Prior
but
to
she
working at
was...
Renaissance? Had you been a fan of Sailor Moon prior to its live-action pilot?
No, I was not a fan of Sailor Moon prior to the
Yeah,
live
she
action
was...
pilot. This is a subject that I talk about a lot on podcast. I would say during the pandemic, I went into overdrive mode with being invited on podcasts. I think some of that has to do with my overall career history and the Sonic the Hedgehog movies coming out, because I do have history with Sonic the Hedgehog and Sega, and also Level 5 and Yokai Watch. And anyway, with the two Sonic films coming out, one right before the pandemic and then one sort of during the pandemic, there's a lot of interest in that, and I still post online about Sonic from time to time.
She's a sweetheart. Like I'm not even kidding.
But anyway, no, I was not a fan of anime at the time. I did not
find her on
get
social
into
media, say hi.
animation
She's
or
really
anime
nice. She's
or
really
cartoons
nice.
or anything like that. I went to school for acting. I have an MFA in musical theater, and I was very much focused on an acting career, but life had another way of working out. I did have an interest in working behind the scenes, and that's why I turned to temping, and temping was a way to get in the offices of various different entertainment companies and work with different teams of people. And so I did grow to love anime and animation, kicking and screaming, I will admit. But
Yeah.
I'm very thankful for the time.
Yeah, I can imagine
also,
working-
for a myriad of reasons, I'm thankful for the time that I worked for Frank. But one of the main reasons is that I got acting opportunities because of it. I've done a ton of dubbing on the cartoons that came from that Saban Renaissance Atlantic Bandai factory.
One live-action project that has remained a mystery to many fans is that of the adaptation of Saint Seiya known as Starstorm. A trailer has been found online, and it also appears on the demo demo reel on your website. Would you happen to still be in possession of this
Nope.
lost tape?
Okay, so I don't have the full pilot. All I have is what's on that demo reel. Might have been circa early 90s. Again, it was something that preceded me that Frank had worked on, but he and I had gone through tons and tons of footage when he decided that he wanted to put together this demo reel. And so he gave me the footage. So at one time, I guess I did have access to it. The long and short of it is I don't have it.
What
Nope.
were your thoughts on anime at the time? What did you think about the studio's aim to convert many anime and Japanese IPs into live action shows after the success of Power Rangers?
I have no idea because I will tell you, when I was working in that area, I was embarrassed to tell people I was working on those shows. You know, my undergrad degree was in drama communications. I had a background in production, and then
And I can imagine they had stage. She had to hear like every single like dumb bad idea. I'm pretty sure she was like, "Oh my god, if I had to hear Alpha 5 go ay one more time, I'm gonna rip my freaking hair off."
In the sense that I was going to be producing all these artful, hilarious, because comedy is my jam, projects that I could star in. Like that was what I wanted to do. And I was embarrassed. Like the original Power Rangers that aired in the US, I thought was just like the worst thing I had ever seen. It was, oh my god, the lip sync was off and the editing was, anyway.
Oh yeah.
I
We didn't
didn't tell
fucking-
anybody what I was working on, but it's only through the years that I've realized what a gift from the universe it was that I worked on these things, because most of my career has been spent in kids and family entertainment, working on a lot of Japanese content and also a lot of content from other countries. So the skills that I learned working with and around Frank, I've used for my entire career, which has been a considerable amount of time. So very, very thankful for all of that. But I don't have the Saint Seiya pilot. I just have what's on that demo reel. So again, it is a head scratcher to me why kids were drawn to Masked Rider and Power Rangers, but thank God they were.
Both Sailor Moon and Saint
I mean,
Seiya
I don't blame her
had
for feeling that
live-action
way.
spin-offs had things gone differently. Do you recall any other shows that were being discussed?
A Mobile Suit Gundam was one that never happened.
Yeah, she talked to us about that.
Godzilla we were working on
Yep.
at the time, and I think it became a series shortly after Frank closed up shop.
My investigation on this subject led to clues that indicate a Dragon Ball adaptation may have been planned. Is this true?
Oh yeah, Frank had done some development before I worked with him on Dragon Ball, because we had some Dragon Ball toys in the office. You could always tell what had been considered for Western export by the toys that Frank had in the office. And we would get so many toy samples. I mean, basically boxed new toys, or we'd get prototypes. And when Frank closed up shop, I took some of it. Some of it we sent to his grandson. Some of it went to an antique store, an antique mall in Culver City. And then a lot of it was donated to charity. Somewhere, maybe in the greater Los Angeles area, in people's garages are those toy samples, the prototypes, and so forth. Anyway, water under the bridge. I don't know what was done on Dragon Ball, though. I just remember we had the toys in the office, and I remember hearing Frank reference it, but I don't know what exactly he did.
From a preservationist standpoint, why do you think fans are so intrigued by lost media?
Oh, well, it's a treasure hunt, right? It's like one person's trash is another person's treasure, and it's like thrifting or excavating artifacts like you would do in Egypt or Africa or some place where you find antiquities. So, and of course, a lot of old
Yeah, I have to go
stuff
by
is
this one
available
stuff. I
through
continue building a little
now,
my
so
friend. Oh,
there's
thank you
some
very much. I
things
really
that
do
people are
appreciate
available
that.
to discover through obvious means, but then there's other stuff that's more elusive because of rights issues or degraded film or what have you. So I love old stuff, I love vintage stuff, and that includes vintage media as well, so I totally relate.
If you could turn one show into a live-action adaptation, what would it be?
Maybe Little Dracula. Gosh, if you can find any of that, I guess maybe some of the episodes are on YouTube. They've been pirated or whatnot. It's so clever, and it's based on these British children's books. I would love to do something with that. I just think it's so clever, so brilliant.
We would love to know more about your current work at Pink Poodle Productions.
Well, here's the mascot right here. Here's Blanche. She's actually a Bichon Poodle mix who has appeared in many of my projects. She's on pretty much every podcast that I've ever done. And right now, one of my big projects is a movie trilogy called Young Captain Nemo. And I am working on that for a company called Rainshine Entertainment. I'm executive producing the trilogy. Other things, I still have my fingers in Japanese content, sometimes Korean content, because I've worked for a number of Korean companies. I also worked for a Jordanian company, so sometimes Middle East contacts come calling. And Rainshine is an Indian company, so like I said, international companies, that's part of what I do as a consultant under my own banner, Pink Poodle Productions. Thank you so much for this opportunity to interview, and I look forward to being in your documentary. I have some pictures that I will try to wrangle from my scrapbooks and scan or take photos of them and send them to you.
I enjoyed my time sitting down with Marlene, hearing about her early ambitions and history with the company, along with her relationship to Frank Ward. From her account, it was clear that with the company having been so small, the work—
Oh, she really is. She really is. We're still in contact.
Probably had to wear multiple hats outside of their job description.
We're still in
While
contact.
This may have caused some early contentious feelings, Marlene emphasized that at the end of the day, she was very thankful to have worked with Frank. As
Yeah,
she
she's just joshing. That's the thing. She's actually really, like I said, she's really dedicated.
Into the animation and
She has
voice
nothing but
acting
nice things to
industry.
say about
She
Frank.
admitted that at the start of her career, she was slightly embarrassed by the work being done at the company, but eventually came to realize how much of a gift that the experience was in helping her find her career path. A pretty heartwarming turnaround, and it was nice to hear that the end result had led to amicable feelings. Unfortunately, Marlene was unable to provide any details on the lost live-action Saint Seiya pilot, as she mentioned production on that project had taken place long before she joined the company. She was, however, responsible for putting together the trailer that could be seen on her showreel, and it was her original edit of this trailer that had been stolen from her YouTube channel and was re-uploaded some years later by another user, which led to rumors of the series spreading throughout the Saint Seiya community. In what felt like a moment of serendipity, I didn't wind up leaving our exchange totally empty-handed. Marlene ended up sharing a lot of valuable information regarding many other anime off of Toei's catalog that were in production for their own Americanized adaptations. What she was able to share with me that day had confirmed a lot of what I had found during my solo investigation in the Library of Congress archives. More lost concepts that never got off the ground, all different stages of production, hidden from the public eye. I felt like I was learning about new and unexplored territories. Previously, looking up entries in the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I happened to come across a Dragon Ball logo registered in 1994 under Renaissance Atlantic. Marlene was able to confirm that Frank Ward had, in fact, been doing some early development on a Dragon Ball series before she had joined their team. She also mentioned development on a Mobile Suit Gundam series and Godzilla, which shortly after their idea was scrapped, wound up having an animated series release in 1998. The show that Marlene was most likely referring to was the animated series Godzilla the Series, based on Godzilla the
No,
movie.
there were plans to
Marlene
do
remarked that
Godzilla,
you could always
Godzilla
tell what
series
anime
way
would be
before
considered
that.
for Western export, based on the
Look
toys
at
Frank
the
had
Twin
in his
Masters
office.
toys.
I
That
felt
should give
this
you an idea what they were
information
planning.
would make it easier to surmise exactly what shows were in the works at Renaissance Atlantic through the additional photos Marlene had provided. Of the photos shared, there were a few in particular that contained hidden and newfound information containing names that I'd recognized from my time at the Library of Congress. The first 3 photographs were taken from the inside of the Renaissance Atlantic office on Beverly Drive in California. A few Power Ranger action figures and Sailor Moon dolls can be seen on the bottom desk shelf in the first image. However, what was on the table above was a little harder to identify. Inside of a yellow truck, next to what I would assume to be a miniature poodle, was what appeared to be a number of tiny toy bears. I believe these dolls to be from the Japanese line of miniature animal figures known as Calico Critters, which was first sold in Japan in 1985 under the name Sylvanian Families. The next photograph was taken in another corner of the office. In the lower nook, there's what appears to be a blue Smurf-like character, and there's more Power Ranger merchandise on display. A poster for the Saban series Masked Rider can be seen on the left wall, and although it's difficult to tell from the picture, my best guess is that the second poster is from the live-action martial arts program WMAC Masters. The third office photo was much more detailed, and most likely was the office of Frank Ward. We can see an old TV and VCR set sitting on the back shelf, nested between more Power Rangers merchandise. Additionally, two strange promotional posters are seen positioned at the top of the shelf. The first poster featured 3 miniature knights set in a medieval period, dressed in various colored armor. It was difficult to determine the exact style of this. I couldn't tell if the animation was Japanese or American. The image was hazy, but it looked like the knights were spraying down a castle-like structure with water. I was certain that this was an advertisement for the unfinished animated series Nutty Knights because I had seen it listed in the Library of Congress. The series slogan was not visible in the image, but my previous research led me to discover that the series slogan had read, "The Knights are getting shorter." What sat to the right of the Nutty Knights poster in this photograph was possibly my favorite discovery. I also found a listing for a show called Jungle Lords in the archives. On the cover, the characters can be seen atop what appears to be a heap of rubble and old concrete. The city behind them looks to be in ruins, and they seem to be living in what appears to be a dystopian future. Because of their skin's bluish-gray tint, the characters' appearance suggests that they are not fully human and may even be androids. They have long limbs and intricate clothing. Although I couldn't really tell what they were wearing, it appeared to be a combination of samurai robes and gold body armor. I felt that this artwork bore a striking resemblance to the short-lived 1997 Deke television series Mummies Alive. The bottom text on the poster read, "So, you think LA is a jungle now?" The last photo revealed the improvised Team Angel prototype dolls Marlene had mentioned during our interview. The clothing was manufactured and tested based on what the girls had worn in the pilot episode, and the prototypes were built using the molds of existing Barbie dolls. For each angel, a variety of outfits that included their battle armor had been created, according to Marlene. Despite not being able to gather many details concerning the Starstorm pilot, the information Marlene shared with me during our interview was extremely helpful in my planned search for other Renaissance Atlantic titles, and confirmed the existence of many other anime in talks to having their own adaptations. I was appreciative of what had come my way, and thought that, after a few little successes, I had come to a stalemate. I had already learned a ton from talking to Marlene, but I still hoped from that interview there would have been material more relevant to the making of Starstorm. Even though Marlene had edited the trailer herself, the full pilot had gotten lost somewhere along the way, and all that was left was a single clip lasting 20 seconds, like a tiny puzzle piece missing from its larger whole. It then dawned on me that my outlook was misguided, and that the glass I was staring at was indeed half full. I was completely ignoring the purpose of my primary objective during my entire investigation. I made note that I would go back over all I had done in search of the missing Starstorm pilot and re-examine all of my evidence in the hope of finding fresh leads. Finding actual people to talk to had kept me so preoccupied that I had overlooked the significance of the 20-second trailer. The trailer was another piece of evidence that had been circulating for a while and deserved to be thoroughly examined on its own. The lead was the trailer. At that moment, it was like a light bulb went off. Why didn't I think of this before? I'd exhausted all of my options and hadn't even considered looking at the piece of evidence that had sparked this entire investigation. Now that we just have a 20-second trailer, we're practically back at the beginning. I'm hoping that by studying the Starstorm footage, I'll be able to find some fresh information or new pieces of evidence that can help me in my search. And so begins my analysis of Starstorm. In the trailer's opening, Seiya is shown strapping into his armor. He looks up to the sky and becomes illuminated by a star, which then cues in the Starstorm logo. He appears to be somewhere on Mount Olympus. A bright light transitions to Shiryu and Iki, where we then see Shun in the following shot, peering out from a pillar, watching a battle between the other 4 Bronze Saints and what appears to be the Gold Saint, Cancer Death Mask. Death Mask then unleashes a devastating blast on Shiryu, sending Seiya and his team into grief over their fallen fallen comrade. Shun tries to use her nebula chain in a surprise sneak attack to slow Death Mask down, but her plan is unsuccessful. The video ends with a close-up of Death Mask shattering a scepter as Seiya and Ikki are seen fleeing from the temple. And that's where it ends. That's pretty much it. So what can be analyzed from this 20-second clip? Well, the most obvious difference I managed to spot was perhaps a change to Andromeda Shun's gender. Shun is now portrayed as a woman, a change that would be repeated several decades later with the 2019 release of Saint Seiya's CGI Netflix remake. So in some strange way, it could be said that the concept of changing Shun's gender from male to female had originated with this project. In this version, Seiya, Hyoga, and Shun are all Caucasian, with Ikki being Black American and Shiryu being the only Asian in the group. This cast
eventually I realized that actually the guy who's Hyoga,
the Bronze Saints are all half-brothers in the anime, with the exception of Shun and Ikki, who share the same mother. They were all fathered by Japanese tech leader Mitsumasa Kido, with different women from around the world, making many of the Saints a mixture of Japanese and other nationalities. As for the location of this clip, my best guess was that they were fighting in the 4th Temple of the Golden Zodiac, a place guarded by the Cancer Gold Saints. In the original series, this is the location where Death Mask is defeated by Dragon Shiryu
Easy to
during
think about.
battle, which could explain why he was the target of Death Mask's attack in the live-action clip. The faces of these actors hadn't been identified anywhere online in the 20-plus years that this trailer has existed. Knowing this, I decided to take it upon myself to examine the clip as best I could in the hopes of identifying the performers in question. Although the video wasn't in the best condition, I reasoned that if I could solve this mystery, it would, in turn, take me further down this rabbit hole and bring me closer to the answers surrounding Starstorm. It was now only a matter of locating the cast, getting in touch with these newly found leads, and hopefully, if at all possible, securing a chance to sit down and learn about their time working on
Son of a bitch, I clipped out the wrong one. Yeah, it was a perfect cut too, like there was no... You know what I mean? I hate that so much. It's like I did a cut that was actually really good.
I spent a good couple of days investigating the 20-second clip, watching it over and over, pausing on
That was like
different
such a
frames
pooter
and
film.
trying to map out their faces from different angles. I looked through some of the IMDb credits for actors who had performed in live-action shows for Renaissance Atlantic in the hopes that one of the faces I'd come across would match up to what I had mapped out. And after a lot of trial and error, I somehow was able to identify 3 out of the 5 knights that I had been looking for. Of the 5 bronze knights, in the Starstorm dub, I was able to learn the identities of Ikki, Shun, and Shiryu. This was it. New leads found completely related to Starstorm, and it was right in front of me this whole time. From just 20 seconds, I had managed to make a little bit of progress in my search, but I still had a long way to go. Of the actors, this is what I was able to find. Actor Gabriel Corbin plays Phoenix Ikki in the live-action Starstorm pilot. Corbin, an American actor, singer, dancer, and model from Las Vegas, is best known for his work in the movies The DL Chronicles, Cheetah in August, and Johnson Family Vacation. Corbin, who was born in 1973, would have been in his early 20s when the pilot was being filmed. In my efforts to learn more about the actor, I managed to find an old copy of his acting resume. His representation was under an agency known as the Parmeter Group, which included the company's contact number. With his last acting credit as a character in the 2019 film The Immortal Wars Resurgence, I figured it was worth a shot to try and call the agency to see if I can get in touch with Gabriel. But apparently, he was no longer affiliated with the agency, so I had to find another way of contacting him. I decided to delve a little bit deeper into Gabriel's social media and ultimately discovered his Instagram. I tried to relay my message there, but it seemed as though he hadn't been active on the platform in some time. Unfortunately, in my pursuit of Gabriel, that's where the trail had ended. But luckily, there were 2 other actors left that could potentially take me further into my investigation. I discovered that the actress who portrayed Andromeda Shun was none other than Krista Sauls, an American actress from the 1980s. Sauls, who was born on April 15, 1972 in Kingston, North Carolina, is a model and actress who's appeared in TV and films such as The Dentist, Beverly Hills 90210, and Killing Cupid. Sauls found moderate mainstream success appearing in popular films like Conan the Adventurer adventurer and has been acting since 1994. With her last active role in 2005, like Gabriel, I was unsure of whether or not Krista had left the entertainment industry, but after searching the web, I was able to pull up the name of the firm she had worked for, the Coast to Coast Talent Group. But when I had called, I was told that they hadn't been Krista's representative for a long time. In a last attempt, I contacted Michael Roth, the director of the 2005 film Killing Cupid, which was Saul's final known project. To my amazement, I received a response from Roth, who said he had been out of touch with the actress for many years and thought she might either be in Southern California or had moved back to her home in North Carolina. Unable to reach 2 out of 3 of my leads, I continued to hold out hope that perhaps my final person of interest would be much easier to reach. Dragon Shiryu, played by actor and producer Eddie Mui, was the last saint I was able to name. Eddie is a Chinese-born actor best known for his roles in Gone in 60 Seconds, Someone I Used to Know, and Unidentified. Eddie was still very active in the film industry, in contrast to his co-stars, and had a pretty impressive backlog of roles dating back to 1992, with his most recent appearance in the 2017 romantic comedy Rice on White. Due to Eddie's moderate social media activity, I was able to locate him on Instagram, where I saw that his most recent post was a throwback of the actor from the early 1990s. When I saw the
Look at
photo,
that stud.
I had no doubt in my mind that this was in fact the right person I was looking for. I made the bold decision to comment directly on his post at that time because I felt as though I had nothing to lose. I asked if he had been involved in the Renaissance Atlantic adaptation of Saint Seiya and if he'd be interested in answering a few questions about it. Checking back, I noticed Eddie liked my comment, and from there, our conversation continued through private messages. Eddie provided me with his personal email so that we could arrange for a thorough interview. I was overjoyed. All of my discoveries up until this point had led me to brick walls and dead ends, but at last, I not only managed to get in touch with one of the actors, but he also gave me the go-ahead to sit down and have a more in-depth conversation. Later that week, I wrote down all of my inquiries and forwarded them to Eddie for review. After a few weeks, I assumed he got busy and sent a few nudges here and there, but they were met with silence, and unfortunately, those weeks had turned into months. Eddie had vanished, and our communication had come to a halt. Feeling somewhat defeated in that moment, I knew it was finally time to call it in.
Here we go.
My search into finding the Starstorm pilot was not a very easy ride, to say the least. I went in very determined to uncover the pilot and had many worries that I'd find myself retreating from my investigation with my tail caught between my legs. Little did I know what would eventually propel me further in my search had turned out to be investigating the clues I already had with a more watchful eye. Had I not sat down and really analyzed the trailer in those final moments, I never would have been able to identify 3 out of the 5 actors who portrayed the Saints in Starstorm, and there had even been some brief interaction between myself and one of the actors. Had I not had that support from viewers, I don't think I would have caught wind of Marlene Sharp, a woman who, in almost a serendipitous moment, was able to confirm the existence of other anime that Renaissance Atlantic had been looking to adapt. How far along in the pipeline they were with these projects, only people closest to the company would know. And it was very unexpected to have been shown the original prototype dolls that were intended for use on the Lost Teen Angel series. Though these might all seem like small finds, learning of these supposed pieces of lost media have now opened the doors for more possible discoveries. It's truly amazing to think of the influence this company could have had if they became a major monopoly of Japanese imports. But despite all those new pieces of information, that feeling of disappointment was somewhat looming over me. I desperately wanted to find the 15-minute pilot in its entirety. I felt like being able to identify and track down some of the actors in my search was only the beginning of something much deeper. And having Eddie make some sort of contact after I reached out was only motivating me to push forward in my search. So hopefully after the release of this documentary, there's a chance I may hear back from Eddie, Krista, and even Gabriel. But until then, I'm hoping what I've been able to uncover has managed to light a spark in the community's hunt for this lost pilot. If I can't,
Oh boy.
maybe someone else can.
Oh
Remember
boy.
when I said in my last documentary that I was still waiting for the remainder of my order to arrive from the Library of Congress? A few months ago, in my search for the live-action Sailor Moon pilot, I was given permission from Frank Ward to obtain a copy of the pilot and all related media from inside of the Library of Congress. When I had drafted up our contract, I distinctly remember adding any and all titles in the catalog that were related to Sailor Moon, along with alternate title names that I had assumed could have been related to the series. Fast forward to the end of my Starstorm investigation, and the strangest thing happened. I honestly couldn't have imagined what was sitting in my inbox that very evening. My initial feelings were of excitement, as all of the documents I had ordered from the library had finally come in. I opened the envelope and was surprised to find a CD-ROM. I must have forgotten that one of my orders had an additional piece of digital media. Maybe, like Team Angel, this would turn out to be another Magical Girl spin-off. But as soon as I put that CD in its tray and hit the play button, what I came to find was something completely unimaginable.
Oh, here we go. Oh man. I kind of want to watch it, but I realize like it's starting to get really late, and like so I think I'm just gonna cut to the main event here. We'll watch this video another day.
Hi guys, it's been a while since I've been on camera, but I wanted for tonight's episode to be a little more intimate. When I first started Tales of the Lost, I really had no idea what would come of the series. I think these cinematic explorations that I do is probably the most fun I've had in terms of video creation on the YouTube platform. And yes, that's despite all of the different creative challenges and how time-consuming the whole research process can be. It's rewarding in some ways, especially when the lost stuff is found. More specifically, with the whole Renaissance Atlantic chapters of these videos, that's been a long, unwinding adventure. I initially went into this investigation into Frank Ward because of Saban Moon, or Sailor Moon, but it's just like become its own beast at this point, and the whole like rabbit hole into Renaissance Atlantic and me learning about all of these different anime adaptations besides Sailor Moon is something that I could not have expected would have come from just investigating Sailor Moon. And yeah, I know some of these things that have been found are straight up goofy or completely far removed from their source material, but I don't want people to watch these videos thinking that the point is to like cringe over the anime that could have been in North America. Renaissance Atlantic's efforts to Americanizing anime, at the core of it, it's because they actually really loved anime and wanted to see it succeed in the West. So you might look at these pilot pitches and at first think, oh, like this looks so sloppy, this looks poorly done. But what I've learned from spending over a year of researching about the back end of production and how these shows are sold, a proof of concept is literally just a rough idea. And that's obviously going to pale in comparison to what a published final copy would look like.
Yeah.
With a lot more money behind that. People have to remember that when they're watching the found material. And at the time, Renaissance Atlantic were desperate. They had
had zero funding. They just set out to sell their ideas in a desperate attempt at convincing execs that anime could be profitable. It was not their fault. So for me, it's just really hard to judge these works as harshly as I see other people do online, because I know at the core of it, they were given peanuts to make magic happen. And whatever did come of it was not obviously going to be the intended final product because, as I said before, they had no funding. It's up to the executives to be like, I think we're gonna take a chance on that, you know? So I hope going forward, like, if anything, I would advise to watch the works with kinder eyes once you realize the whole back history behind how these things were made.
Yeah.
You can watch these pilots and just judge them based on those facts and not just, oh, cringe content, you know? I don't know, I guess like the comments where, because they have gotten good comments, but I guess the ones where people are just like retching and like sheer disgust, it can be a little much. And it just makes me realize that a lot of people are unaware of how pilots are made and that most proof of concepts aren't even made with the intention of them being shown to the public. So,
yeah,
fine.
that's...
But anyways, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to thank everybody who's made this possible. Just from your comments, your likes, the patrons, the people that are members, thank you so much. Lastly, before we get to the video, I'd ask that if you like what I'm doing, please support me in any way that you'd like, whether it be subscribing to the channel, becoming a channel member, or even pledging on Patreon. I really think I could hit 100k this year. I am just so close. And with more follows and support, the more I'll be able to create videos just like this. So, with all of that out of the way, thank you so much for watching, and please enjoy tonight's episode. In the vibrant cultural landscape of the mid-1990s, a wave of Japanese media swept into the United States, riding off of the groundbreaking success of the recent American-adapted Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. This cultural phenomenon opened the doors for more Japanese content to further captivate American audiences. After the Golden Gates had opened for countless anime to be passed through for potential dubs and spin-offs, Frank Ward, former president of Bandai America, recognized the potential for the 1986 Saint Seiya anime to shine even brighter in the US market. Unfortunately, at the time, unexpected hurdles loomed large. Copyright complexities and the series' intense themes made it a tough sell to toy markets and TV executives. Determined to expand the franchise's reach and boost action figure sales, Bandai America embarked on a bold venture, crafting a 15-minute live-action pilot for a reimagined Saint Seiya, bringing us to the year of 1994, the year this proposed live-action had been produced. 1st. The series was renamed from Saint Seiya to Starstorm. This live-action take on the iconic anime introduced its own set of bizarre alterations. Despite these creative shifts, the pilot failed to win over Saint Seiya creator Masami Kurumada, who felt the essence of the series had been diluted, veering closer to Ninja Turtles territory than actually honoring the original source material. The project's demise
oh damn, sorry about that.
In a satisfactory manner. Despite this initial failed attempt to bring the series to the United States, Saint Seiya eventually
that could do it.
Audiences in 2003 through Deke Animation, airing under the new title Knights of the Zodiac. 2 more English dubs, which attempted to better capture the source material, were later produced by Sentai Filmworks and ADV Films. Over the years, the closest thing we've seen to a live-action interpretation of the series was the
movie
recent Hollywood film adaptation, which aired in 2023 called Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac. Since 1994, the full Starstorm pilot had only been viewed by Masami Kurumada and Frank Ward and his team at Bandai, who had presented the pilot to him on that fateful day. Years later, miraculously, a 20-second trailer was leaked online as part of a compilation piece for Renaissance Atlantic's company portfolio. Grabbing the immediate attention of Saint Seiya fans everywhere, news of a rumored pilot spread like wildfire, soon becoming a tantalizing enigma to the Saint Seiya community, eager to one day uncover the pilot in all its glory. Since its discovery, numerous attempts have been made to locate this piece of lost media, including an investigation conducted last year by yours truly. In my 2-part documentary on my findings, titled The Secret Story of Saint Seiya, I set out to discover the pilot in its entirety, and while I didn't manage to uncover the full pilot episode, I was lucky enough to ascertain the identities of a few actors who appeared in the pilot episode. However, just when I thought my search had reached a halt, I wound up stumbling on an entirely different Saint Seiya adaptation that predated the creation of the elusive Starstorm concept in a strange and serendipitous sequence of events. As luck would have it, what I discovered was a fully animated American retelling of the original Saint Seiya anime, an earlier spin-off that had been pitched to Kurumada by Renaissance Atlantic, animated by Fred Wolf Films, known as Guardians of the Cosmos. This was supposedly the company's first attempt at modifying the franchise for a North American audience. Baffled by my new discovery, and in hot pursuit of new answers, I made a last-ditch attempt at reaching out to former Renaissance Atlantic CEO Frank Ward in the hopes that our sit-down could potentially reveal new insights on not only Starstorm and Guardians of the Cosmos, but any other hidden treasures that were lying dormant in the Library of Congress. Our enlightening conversation revealed the company's mission to bridge cultural divides in a landscape resistant to Japanese anime. Frank's insights painted a picture of perseverance in the face of industry changes, striving to salvage a medium at risk of rejection by American networks. As our exchange concluded, I was pleasantly surprised when Frank graciously granted access to his Library of Congress submissions, promising this treasure trove of further discoveries into the lost world of early American anime adaptations. Excited to delve deeper into this compelling narrative, I once again embarked on a journey to uncover the untold tales of Saint Seiya's American Odyssey, armed with newfound knowledge and a burning passion to illuminate the legacy of these forgotten adaptations.
Could it be that you're burning your cosmos?
I wasted no time sending in my file request to the Library of Congress, but to my dismay, I very quickly learned that out of everything I had requested to receive copies of, sadly, 3 out of the 4 files I had requested regarding Starstorm had gone missing somewhere within the library archives, rendering them irretrievable for the time being. This was depressing news to say the least, but fortunately, I wasn't ready to give up. despite this setback, they still had one remaining Starstorm entry that could be of great use to me in my hunt to find the pilot episode. Available in their archives was the infamous 20-second trailer that was crafted by Marlene Sharp and Salvador Lidvack that had been the smoking gun that first alerted fans to
Some
the
sort of
pilot's
cosmos
existence.
that burns within
I
us.
was absolutely positive that if I requested a physical copy of the trailer, this media file would also come with an included description of contents, similar to what happened when I requested a copy of Guardians of the Cosmos. Gaining access to this single-page document, I had a high chance at revealing more secrets behind what had been planned for the series, and perhaps could include new names of people involved that would be worth investigating. And sure enough, I had been correct in my approach. After weeks of anxiously waiting, I received a package of all the materials requested from the Library of Congress, and in that large envelope containing a copy of the 20-second trailer, the long-awaited description of contents had been included. I had struck gold. Scanning the document, these were the details outlined in the summary of Starstorm.
A long time ago, Kronos ruled the world with his son, Bellatrix, and his daughter, Karina. Bellatrix has returned to Earth because of...
Oh, that's a Geek You! That's Sarin! I recognize the voice!
From mankind
Oh
so that
shit!
he can rule
That's
himself.
Sarin!
His sister Karina wishes to give the humans another chance. Karina's bodyguard explains to 5 young adults why Karina is kidnapped by Claw, Bellatrix his henchman, and the 5 young adults search out Bellatrix's hideout in order to save Karina. The 5 young adults do in fact save Karina and tell Claw to tell Bellatrix that they will be watching.
Unsurprisingly, it seemed that Starstorm would have been vastly different from its source material. With those minor differences, the plot had read almost identical to that of the earlier Guardians of the Cosmos outline. In both adaptations, Karina and Nova, characters adapted from Sayori/Athena, called to the Knights to protect the humans of the Earth from the wrath of their brother, known as Bellatrix in Starstorm, and Apollo in Guardians of the Cosmos. Sayori/Athena's brother in both respective adaptations is hell-bent on destroying mankind for how they've polluted and degraded the Earth over the years. Upon comparing both descriptions, it had suddenly dawned on me that something was amiss. When I had taken out a copy of the pilot episode of Guardians of the Cosmos, the description of contents made sure to outline exactly what would be seen in its accompanying viewing material. That is, of course, why it's called a description of contents. Realizing this, I found it curious how different the Starstorm description was from the notorious 20-second trailer that had graced the web years ago. Instead of providing a literal description, it seemed to outline a completely different sequence of events. It seemed more like an overall summary. That's when the gears really started to turn, and I really started to pay attention. I then noticed that on that very sheet, the runtime for the clip was mislabeled. It said that the media I obtained that was labeled Starstorm Trailer had a runtime listed at approximately 7 minutes. Then, it hit me. I suddenly felt the weight of this new ordeal looming over me. If this was not the 20-second trailer it had been labeled as, what exactly did I now have in my possession?
Play it! Play it! Play it!
As I gazed at the CD-ROM, a deep anxiety had set within the depths of my soul. I initially thought the media file labeled Starstorm Trailer was, in fact, the infamous 20-second trailer that had been featured in Renaissance Atlantic's showreel. But judging by the description of contents, I was perhaps holding on to something more valuable than I originally assumed. Without hesitation, I pried open the jewel case, popped the CD into my computer.
Let's do something different here. I'm already done with it today with the building, but I want to finish up this video. Let me take a photo of this. But we are gonna, but I'm gonna do something here really. I'm gonna do something here, something really quick here. Something that's beneficial to everybody here, because like this is big news here. And that off. Main screen. Let's go.
Drive and proceeded to witness something quite unexpected. And this is what I found.
Starstone trailer without credits. 1994. Oh boy. Here it goes. Here comes 2. Harbor City, 2012.
Long before the now time, in the days of kings and legends, Atlantis was the center of all civilization. Bellatrix, son of Kronos, and his noble sister
Karina. The cheese.
With what mankind has since done to the planet, Bellatrix and his armies have now returned
Bellatrix.
with a vengeance. All freedom has been taken away, and the human race enslaved. Because she opposed him, Bellatrix has even imprisoned Karina, his own.
I love this guy's voice.
She remains today in his palace. You will free her.
But what could we possibly do?
But there's only 5 of us.
Excuse me, but with all due respect, sir, who are you?
I am Omnicron, advisor to the good Princess Karina. I am also your new instructor. It is no accident.
Oh man, I love this guy's voice.
On the day of your births, you were chosen by Karina herself to one day fight by her side. For 18 years, you've trained for just this day. The day you too shall proudly wear the star armor. Look closely and learn. Others before you have been called to wear the star armor.
Ah!
The secret of its powers lies deep in the heavens, at the very core of the cosmos. The armor is indestructible, and only the bravest of the brave are chosen to wear it. Those who do are invincible. But the armor will do more than protect you. Once energized, through it will pass to you undreamed of.
Oh god! Ah, turn it off! Turn it off!
And from this day forward, you shall wear the armor and possess the power of the star, whose name you shall bear. Centaurus, the burning red giant. Your power shall be known as the flames of Centaurus.
Centaurus, huh?
Glowing like the dragon's eye, your power, the eyes of Omega.
The wyvern?
Your enemies will fear the chains of Electra. Titan,
Electra?
the ice star. The rings of Titan shall your powers be. And Zenith, born of fire, your power shall be known as the light of Zenith. You 5 specially chosen young warriors and your adventures are destined to be known to all legend of Star Storm.
Whoa.
Karina! Zenith! Omega!
Centaurus, there! Man, here come the Imperial Guards.
You didn't think Bellatrix was just gonna let us walk in here and take her, did you?
I'll try to swing around behind him. You guys.
I know. I want to build stuff too right now in Breaker Flare. I totally get ya. There's my Gundam Evolution 2 like a Boogaloo.
Hurry! There isn't much time.
Whee! God damn! Toss that son of a bitch aside. Oh, I love it. There's a girl there with you?
I am Claw, guardian of the Palace of Bellatrix. Who dares enter here?
We've come for Karina, and you won't stop us, Claw.
Brave words, young warrior. But there have been others before you. They all failed. You too shall fail.
Fail. I beam.
You dare to challenge me? I fear only Bellatrix, destroyer of worlds. No one has ever faced me and returned to tell the tale. Now you will know what real power is. No!
I mean, technically, Salty John, they have skins for Gundam now in Call of Duty.
Nice shooting, Claw. Thanks for the help.
Ah!
Titan, what are you doing? Forget about me, man.
We got to go now. Claw's too powerful. That eyes won't hold for long.
Hurry, please. You can't imagine the horrible things he's capable of.
I actually want to call up and play Call of Duty again. God damn.
Now you are mine.
Whee! Woo!
You tell Bellatrix his days are numbered. Tell him he will no longer rule this world unopposed. That people will no longer get down on their knees before him. You tell him that wherever he goes and whenever he does, we'll be waiting.
Ha! Yeah, you show him. To be continued never again. Oracle. Damn.
There it was this entire time. This discovery had my jaw down to the floor. This whole time, the full pilot had been mislabeled in the Library of Congress. I stood there, mystified. I had been investigating the lost Starstorm pilot for a little over a year. I spent so many nights trying to track down Renaissance Atlantic employees and any familiar names and faces of people closely associated with the project. My efforts even led me down the path of unearthing a previously unknown attempt at Americanizing the series. I hit so many surprises along the way, but never in a million years did I expect that what I had originally dismissed as the Starstorm trailer would actually turn out to be the entire pilot episode itself. So, how was it that this mix-up even occurred? How did this pilot get confused with the trailer? While I can't say for certain how something like this could have ever happened, with the vast backlog of Renaissance Atlantic material being crafted in the 90s, it wouldn't be all that surprising to assume that somewhere along the way, when submitting to the Library of Congress, something as small as a title error could have taken place.
The video itself is also much shorter than what you would expect of a pilot that can usually run anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. So perhaps after seeing that approximation in time, it made it easier to assume it was nothing more than a trailer rather than a brief treatment. On top of this, the title screen not only notes that the video submission is a creditless treatment, which could account for more lost time, but also there is a huge chunk of the video at the end that is nothing but a black screen, giving it an actual runtime of 11 minutes and 30 seconds. And before you ask, this is not because of any lost footage, since the pilot has a clear beginning and end.
Yeah.
Black space is a very common occurrence for copies of transferred tapes. This was the same case with the raw Guardians of the Cosmos footage that had significantly long black spaces placed in between the episode to account for commercial breaks. So perhaps, with all that time having gone by since viewing the pilot, maybe Kurumada recalling the runtime to be 15 minutes was more likely an error on his end.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure the pitch meeting and presentation portion of the pilot could have all just been meshed together in his mind. Now, we all know this would not be a legitimate Tales of the Lost if I didn't go over my new findings. And fortunately, with this last bit of new information and a higher quality of video, I had all the tools necessary to try and unravel more details about the pilot's production, along with uncovering the remaining identities of the actors who portrayed the now visible characters present in the pilot concept. New production details. We now know the production details for the making of the Starstorm pilot based on what appears at the title card. The project had been completed on December 13th, 1994, and the team responsible for shooting the pilot was the California-based company More Gallerani and More Films. Browsing their website using the Wayback Machine, the company was shown to have a multitude of experience, primarily shooting toy commercials at the time, which probably worked in their favor when they were given the task of shooting the pilot episode. In the title card, we can also see that an Andrew Gallerini was credited as director, with Melody Woods as producer and Margot Ott as head of production. As far as I know, all of the people involved in producing Starstorm still work at More Gallerini and More Films to this day. The company now goes under the name Rebel Robot, with a new official website last updated fairly recently. The setting. We learn in the first few seconds of the pilot that our story takes place in a New York or Washington-looking area called Harbor City and is set in the year of 2012.
The futuristic year.
Rather than being drafted from different parts of the world like in Saint Seiya, in this iteration, our heroes all seem to be Harbor City natives and are summoned by Omnicron, aka Tatsumi, to go off and save the princess elsewhere. It should also be noted that rather than the home of the gods being in the sanctuary of ancient Greece, the Starstorm universe places Karina, Bellatrix, Kronos, and the other gods all in the fictional city of Atlantis. Identifiable actors. Lastly, with a now higher quality video, I was finally able to do more thorough digging into the cast to better match up the actors. From my previous investigations, I was able to identify a small handful of actors that portrayed the cast. I found out that Shun, now known as Elektra in the Starstorm adaptation, was portrayed by American actress Krista Sauls. Iki, now called Zenith, was played by actor Gabriel Corbin, along with Shiryu, now known as Omega, who can be seen played by actor Eddie Mui. With new faces present, an updated search just had to be done, and curiously, while sorting through these images, I came across a very surprising find. I was shocked to discover that the character Centaurus, who is the live-action counterpart to Seiya from the anime, was actually portrayed by two different actors in the pilot episode. For the majority of the pilot, meaning in the battle scenes and the scene with Omnicron, Seiya is played by adult film actor Jared Carey.
Oh!
In the flashback sequence at Atlantis during the beginning of the pilot, that we see the Centaurus armor being worn by ex-bodybuilder and adult film actor Butler. According to the words of Omnicron, he states that many men before them have worn this armor. This would imply that the powers of each knight had been passed down, with Jared Carey's character now acting as the new Centaurus.
The next actor I managed to identify was the actress playing Karina, aka Sayori or Athena. In Starstorm, she was portrayed by the young Suzanne Davis, who appeared in a number of shows in the early 90s and, more notably, for those who can recall, later went on to appear in the cancelled 1996 television film Generation
Oh,
X,
shit.
which was the first live-action pitch of an X-Men series as the mutant called Buff. Aside from these
Oh,
three
God.
new actors, I had some difficulties pinning down the remaining identities of Titan, Omnicron, and Claw. Titan, the counterpart for Hyoga, was a fit blonde with a strong jaw and soft eyes.
He eventually found-
Stood
he-
out to me for having a remarkably familiar face. Meanwhile, Bellatrix's henchman Claw, who I believe to be an interpretation of the character Cancer Deathmask,
Yeah.
I found shared some
Oh.
similarities to a young Sylvester Stallone, though it's definitely
You guessed it, it's Frank Stallone.
not him. Unfortunately, he also wound up turning up no results. That just left me with the actor for Omnicron, the American reimagining of Sayori's bodyguard and butler, Tokumaru Tatsumi, appearing in this adaptation as more of a mysterious and cloaked figure. The only result that had come up when I performed a reverse image search was this picture right here. All searches on him kept leading me back to some music award show photograph spotlighting the group Destiny's Child. But standing in the background was a man who shared similar features with the man in the pilot episode, specifically his eyes, nose, and ears. Every website that hosted this image made no mention of this man in the background, but surely he might have had some involvement in the music industry. There's no way to know for certain that it's him. So as a bizarre open letter to Beyonce or Destiny's Child or anyone who has better knowledge of 90s R&B figures than myself, if you know who this man is, please give me a call. When American computer scientist Eliezer Yudkowsky said, "The obvious choice isn't always the best choice, but sometimes it is," he was definitely onto something. If I hadn't ventured into this long, unwinding rabbit hole of the past anime adaptations of Renaissance Atlantic, two of our biggest lost media mysteries in the anime community would have been close to being lost to time. On top of that, in a moment of serendipity, so many more hidden discoveries about past American plans for anime had been unearthed from the Library of Congress. Time and patience was all it took. Almost 2 years of investigating the backlogs of Renaissance Atlantic and the significance of the company. And after all these moments poured into my investigation, I can finally put the files of Renaissance Atlantic to rest and start anew on a different adventure. These proof of concepts, pilot pitches, and
Hey, Shiro, how you doing?
It's crazy to think that in some universe, all these
We're almost done with
things
the
would have
stream
been
today.
norm. And I'm grateful to have been able to get a glimpse of this, as it's been so eye-opening seeing the behind-the-scenes pipeline of pitching, selling, and localizing material to be introduced to the masses. As a person who
Oh, I'm good.
someday
Like I said,
hoping to
we're-
sell my own stories and create my own feature films,
I
this
didn't get the
explorative
Faku
deep dive was
getting
also
the concept
greatly
for
enriching
Kuromada.
for my
Oh,
own
damn.
journey as a young filmmaker.
Oh
And I
yeah,
was
I'm
happy to
fine.
have had your
I'm
support
fine
along
now,
the way.
Shiro. Just
From
we're we're
Universe
finishing
DS
watching
to
a.
Clueless to Saban Moon to Guardians of the Cosmos and now Starstorm. I'd just like to say thank you for following me on this relentless quest. It's not only your support that drives me, but it's the thrill of the chase. I will not stop looking for things that intrigue me the most. I will not stop being curious about the past and lost relics. And I will only explore these things with a childlike wonder driving me with each step I take. And I will also make this ride as fun as possible through the power of storytelling and imagination. And in this never-ending hunt, if you've managed to feel the same thrill, excitement, suspense, and satisfaction on this journey as I have, then I know I've done my job at creating something meaningful that can resonate with people all over the world. And so, I eagerly await the next chapter of my journey, sharply anticipating the allure of a new mystery that will keep me perched upon the edge of my seat. Until then, I remain online, scouring the depths of the web for the next enchanting story waiting to be unveiled.
And yeah, there you go. Damn, that was a journey. That was a journey and a half to like 3 years later. Almost 10 years later, we finally get the answer to all this, and sorry about that. I'm just kind of beside myself. I'm like, wow, it took us this long. I joke, but it's also like really interesting, like where we ended up with a lot of this stuff. So. Let's see who is online tonight, so we can send you all to somebody. I think I already saw somebody already that we can raid out to. So. Did I miss it?
Meow?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm about to head out though, yeah. That sound will not. That sound's not gonna go off until a very long time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Adu. I don't know why. I don't know why they don't let you overlap your stuff like that. Let's see here. Yeah, we're done for the evening, guys. So let's see. Who should I send you out to? How much longer is this guy gonna be here? But. No, not this guy. Now, when in doubt, I see here who is also another gunpla maker. They're doing stuff right now. They're working on a custom Caliburn they're working on a custom Caliburn. So let us go and raid out to them. So yeah, I'll let y'all go. Tomorrow is going to be the Saint Seiya Cosmocast. I'll be on the lookout for that. Well, as I guess I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.